Chapter 81. Cardinal Mazarin as King. The arrest produced no sensation, indeed was almost unknown, and scarcely interrupted the course of events. To the deputation it was formally announced that the Queen would receive it. Accordingly, it was admitted to the presence of Anne, who, silent and lofty as ever, listened to the speeches and complaints of the deputies. But when they had finished their harangues, not one of them could say, so calm remained her face, whether or no she had heard them. On the other hand, Mazarin, present at that audience, heard very well what those deputies demanded. It was purely and simply his removal, in terms clear and precise. The discourse being finished, the Queen remained silent. "Gentlemen," said Mazarin, "I join with you in supplicating the Queen to put an end to the miseries of her subjects. I have done all in my power to ameliorate them, and yet the belief of the public, you say, is that they proceed from me, an unhappy foreigner, who has been unable to please the French. Alas! I have never been understood, and no wonder. I succeeded a man of the most sublime genius that ever upheld the scepter of France. The memory of Richelieu annihilates me. In vain, were I an ambitious man, should I struggle against such remembrances as he has left, but that I am not ambitious I am going to prove to you. I own myself conquered. I shall obey the wishes of the people. If Paris has injuries to complain of, who has not some wrongs to be redressed? Paris has been sufficiently punished. Enough blood has flowed, enough misery has humbled a town deprived of its king and of justice. 'Tis not for me, a private individual, to disunite a queen from her kingdom. Since you demand my resignation, I retire." "Then," said Aramis in his neighbor's ear, "the conferences are over. There is nothing to do but to send Monsieur Mazarin to the most distant frontier and to take care that he does not return even by that, nor any other entrance into France." "One instant, sir," said the man in a gown, whom he addressed. "A plague on't! How fast you go! One may soon see that you're a soldier. There's the article of remunerations and indemnifications to be discussed and set to rights." "Chancellor," said the Queen, turning to Seguier, our old acquaintance, "you will open the conferences. They can take place at Rouen. The Cardinal has said several things which have agitated me, therefore I will not speak more fully now. As to his going or staying, I feel too much gratitude to the Cardinal not to leave him free in all his actions. He shall do what he wishes to do." A transient pallor overspread the speaking countenance of the Prime Minister. He looked at the Queen with anxiety. Her face was so passionless that he, as everyone else present, was incapable of reading her thoughts. "But," added the Queen, "in awaiting the Cardinal's decision let there be, if you please, a reference to the King only." The deputies bowed and left the room. "What?" exclaimed the Queen, when the last of them had quitted the apartment. "You would yield to these limbs of the law, these advocates?" "To promote your Majesty's welfare, madam," replied Mazarin, fixing his penetrating eyes on the Queen, "there is no sacrifice that I would not make," and dropped her head and fell into one of those reveries so habitual with her. A recollection of Athos came into her mind. His fearless deportment, his words, so firm, yet dignified, the shades which by one word he had evoked, recalled to her the past in all its intoxication of poetry and romance, youth, beauty, the éclat of love at 20 years of age, the bloody death of Buckingham, the only man whom she had ever really loved, and the heroism of those obscure champions who had saved her from the double hatred of Richelieu and the king. Mazarin looked at her, and whilst she deemed herself alone and freed from the world of enemies who sought to spy into her secret thoughts, he read her thoughts in her countenance, as one sees in a transparent lake clouds pass, reflections, like thoughts, of the heavens. "Must we then," asked Anne of Austria, "yield to the storm, by peace, and patiently and piously await better times?" Mazarin smiled sarcastically at this speech, which showed that she had taken the minister's proposal seriously. Anne's head was bent down. She had not seen the Italian smile, but finding that her question elicited no reply she looked up. "Well, you do not answer, Cardinal. What do you think about it?" "I am thinking, madam, of the allusion made by that insolent gentleman, whom you have caused to be arrested, to the Duke of Buckingham, to him whom you allowed to be assassinated, to the Duchess de Chevreuse, whom you suffered to be exiled, to the Duc de Beaufort, whom you imprisoned, but if he made allusion to me it was because he is ignorant of the relation in which I stand to you." And drew up, as she always did, when anything touched her pride. She blushed, and that she might not answer, clasped her beautiful hands till her sharp nails almost pierced them. That man has sagacity, honor, and wit, not to mention likewise that he is a man of undoubted resolution. You know something about him, do you not, madam? I shall tell him, therefore, and in doing so I shall confer a personal favor on him, how he is mistaken in regard to me. What is proposed to me would be, in fact, almost an abdication, and an abdication requires reflection. An abdication? Repeated Anne. I thought, sir, that it was kings alone who abdicated. Well, replied Mazarin, and am I not almost a king indeed of France? Thrown over the foot of the royal bed, my simar, madam, looks not unlike the mantle worn by kings. This was one of the humiliations which Mazarin made and undergo more frequently than any other, and one that bowed her head with shame. Queen Elizabeth and Catherine too, of Russia are the only two monarchs of their set on record who were at once sovereigns and lovers. Anne of Austria looked with a sort of terror at the threatening aspect of the cardinal. His physiognomy in such moments was not destitute of a certain grandeur. Sir, she replied, did I not say, and did you not hear me say to those people, that you should do as you pleased? In that case, said Mazarin, I think it must please me best to remain, not only on account of my own interest, but for your safety. Remain, then, sir, nothing can be more agreeable to me, only do not allow me to be insulted. You are referring to the demands of the rebels and to the tone in which they stated them? Patience. They have selected a field of battle on which I am an abler general than they, that of a conference. No, we shall beat them by merely temporizing. They want food already. They will be 10 times worse off in a week. Ah yes. Good heavens! I know it will end in that way, but it is not they who taunt me with the most wounding reproaches, but— I understand, you mean to allude to the recollections perpetually revived by these 3 gentlemen. However, we have them safe in prison, and they are just sufficiently culpable for us to keep them in prison as long as we find it convenient. One only is still not in our power and braves us. But, devil take him! We shall soon succeed in sending him to join his boon companions. We have accomplished more difficult things than that. In the first place I have as a precaution shut up at Rouen, near me, under my own eyes, within reach of my hand, the 2 most intractable ones. Today the 3rd will be there also. As long as they are in prison all will be well, said Anne, but one of these days they will get out. Yes, if your Majesty releases them, exclaimed Anne, following the train of her own thoughts on such occasions. One regrets Paris. Why so? On account of the Bastille, sir, which is so strong and so secure. Madam, these conferences will bring us peace. When we have peace we shall regain Paris. With Paris, the Bastille, and our 4 bullies shall rot therein. And frowned slightly when Mazarin, in taking leave, kissed her hand. Mazarin, after this half-humble, half-gallant attention, went away, and followed him with her eyes, and as he withdrew, at every step he took, a disdainful smile was seen playing, then gradually burst upon her lips. I once, she said, despised the love of a cardinal who never said, I shall do, but, I have done so and so. That man knew of retreats more secure than Rouen, darker and more silent even than the Bastille. Degenerate world. Chapter 82. Precautions. After quitting and Mazarin took the road to Rouen, where he usually resided. In those times of disturbance he went about with numerous followers and often disguised himself. In military dress he was, indeed, as we have stated, a very handsome man. In the court of the old chateau of Saint-Germain he entered his coach, and reached the Seine at Chatou. The prince had supplied him with 50 light horse, not so much by way of guard as to show the deputies how readily the Queen's generals dispersed their troops and to prove that they might be safely scattered at pleasure. Athos, on horseback, without his sword and kept in sight by Comminges, followed the cardinal in silence. Grimaud, finding that his master had been arrested, fell back into the ranks near Aramis, without saying a word and as if nothing had happened. Grimaud had, indeed, during 22 years of service, seen his master extricate himself from so many difficulties that nothing less than Athos's imminent death was likely to make him uneasy. At the branching off of the road toward Paris, Aramis, who had followed in the cardinal's suite, turned back. Mazarin went to the right hand and Aramis could see the prisoner disappear at the turning of the avenue. Athos, at the same moment, moved by a similar impulse, looked back also. The two friends exchanged a simple inclination of the head and Aramis put his finger to his hat, as if to bow, Athos alone comprehending by that signal that he had some project in his head. 10 minutes afterward Mazarin entered the court of that chateau which his predecessor had built for him at Rouen. As he alighted, Comminges approached him. "My lord," he asked, "where does your eminence wish Monsieur Comte de la Fere to be lodged?" "In the pavilion of the Orangery, of course, in front of the pavilion where the guard is. I wish every respect to be shown the Count, although he is the prisoner of Her Majesty the Queen." "My lord," answered Comminges, "he begs to be taken to the place where Monsieur d'Artagnan is confined, that is, in the hunting lodge, opposite the Orangery." Mazarin thought for an instant. Comminges saw that he was undecided. "'Tis a very strong post," he resumed, "and we have 40 good men, tried soldiers, having no connection with Frondeurs nor any interest in the Fronde." "If we put these 3 men together, Monsieur Comminges," said Mazarin, "we must double the guard, and we are not rich enough in fighting men to commit such acts of prodigality." Comminges smiled. Mazarin read and construed that smile. "You do not know these men, Monsieur Comminges, but I know them, first personally, also by hearsay. I sent them to carry aid to King Charles and they performed prodigies to save him. Had it not been for an adverse destiny, that beloved monarch would this day have been among us. But since they served your eminence so well, why are they, my lord cardinal, in prison?" "In prison," said Mazarin, "and when has Rouen been a prison?" "Ever since there were prisoners in it," answered Comminges. "These gentlemen, Comminges, are not prisoners," returned Mazarin, with his ironical smile, "only guests, but guests so precious that I have put a grating before each of their windows and bolts to their doors, that they may not refuse to continue my visitors. So much do I esteem them that I am going to make the Comte de la Fere a visit, that I may converse with him tête-à-tête, and that we may not be disturbed at our interview you must conduct him, as I said before, to the pavilion of the Orangery. That, you know, is my daily promenade. Well, while taking my walk I will call on him and we will talk. Although he professes to be my enemy I have sympathy for him, and if he is reasonable perhaps we shall arrange matters." Comminges bowed and returned to Athos, who was awaiting with apparent calmness, but with real anxiety, the result of the interview. "Well?" he said to the lieutenant. "Sir," replied Comminges, "it seems that it is impossible." "Monsieur de Comminges," said Athos, "I have been a soldier all my life and I know the force of orders. But outside your orders there is a service you can render me." "I will do it with all my heart," said Comminges, "for I know who you are and what service you once performed for Her Majesty. I know, too, how dear to you is the young man who came so valiantly to my aid when that old rogue of a Broussel was arrested. I am entirely at your service, except only for my orders." "Thank you, sir. What I am about to ask will not compromise you in any degree." "If it should even compromise me a little," said Monsieur de Comminges with a smile, "still make your demand. I don't like Mazarin any better than you do. I serve the Queen and that draws me naturally into the service of the cardinal, but I serve the one with joy and the other against my will. Speak, then, I beg of you, I wait and listen." "Since there is no harm," said Athos, "in my knowing that D'Artagnan is here, I presume there will be none in his knowing that I am here. I have received no orders on that point." "Well, then, do me the kindness to give him my regards and tell him that I am his neighbor. Tell him also what you have just told me, that Mazarin has placed me in the pavilion of the Orangery in order to make me a visit, and assure him that I shall take advantage of this honor he proposes to accord to me to obtain from him some amelioration of our captivity." "Which cannot last," interrupted Comminges. "The cardinal said so. There is no prison here." "But there are oubliettes," replied Athos, smiling. "Oh, that's a different thing. Yes, I know there are traditions of that sort, said Comminges. It was in the time of the other cardinal, who was a great nobleman, but our Mazarin, impossible. An Italian adventurer would not dare to go such lengths with such men as ourselves. Oubliettes are employed as a means of kingly vengeance, and a low-born fellow such as he is would not have recourse to them. Your arrest is known, that of your friends will soon be known, and all the nobility of France would demand an explanation of your disappearance. No, be easy on that score. I will, however, inform Monsieur d'Artagnan of your arrival here. Comminges then led the Count to a room on the ground floor of a pavilion, at the end of the orangery. They passed through a courtyard as they went, full of soldiers and courtiers. In the center of this court, in the form of a horseshoe, were the buildings occupied by Mazarin, and at each wing the pavilion, or smaller building, where D'Artagnan was confined, and that, level with the orangery, where Athos was to be. From the ends of these two wings extended the park. Athos, when he reached his appointed room, observed through the gratings of his window, walls and roofs, and was told, on inquiry by Comminges, that he was looking on the back of the pavilion where D'Artagnan was confined. Yes, 'tis too true, said Comminges, 'tis almost a prison, but what a singular fancy this is of yours, Count, you, who are the very flower of our nobility, to squander your valor and loyalty amongst these upstarts, the Frondists. Really, Count, if ever I thought that I had a friend in the ranks of the royal army, it was you. A Frondeur. You, the Comte de la Fere, on the side of Broussel, Blancmesnil and Viole. For shame. You, a Frondeur. On my word of honor, said Athos, one must be either a Mazarinist or a Frondeur. For a long time I had these words whispered in my ears, and I chose the latter. At any rate, it is a French word. And now I am a Frondeur, not of Broussel's party, nor of Blancmesnil's, nor am I with Viole, but with the Duc de Beaufort, the Ducs de Bouillon and d'Elbeuf, with princes, not with presidents, councillors and low-born lawyers. Besides, what a charming outlook it would have been to serve the cardinal. Look at that wall, without a single window, which tells you fine things about Mazarin's gratitude. Yes, replied de Comminges, more especially if it could reveal how Monsieur d'Artagnan for this last week has been anathematizing him. Poor D'Artagnan, said Athos, with the charming melancholy that was one of the traits of his character, so brave, so good, so terrible to the enemies of those he loves. You have two unruly prisoners there, sir. Unruly, Comminges smiled. You wish to terrify me, I suppose? When he came here, Monsieur d'Artagnan provoked and braved the soldiers and inferior officers, in order, I suppose, to have his sword back. That mood lasted some time, but now he's as gentle as a lamb and sings Gascon songs, which make one die of laughing. And Du Vallon? Asked Athos. Ah, he's quite another sort of person, a formidable gentleman indeed. The first day he broke all the doors in with a single push of his shoulder, and I expected to see him leave Rouen in the same way as Samson left Gaza. But his temper cooled down, like his friends. He not only gets used to his captivity, but jokes about it. So much the better, said Athos. Do you think anything else was to be expected of them? Asked Comminges, who, putting together what Mazarin had said of his prisoners and what the Comte de la Fere had said, began to feel a degree of uneasiness. Athos, on the other hand, reflected that this recent gentleness of his friends most certainly arose from some plan formed by D'Artagnan. Unwilling to injure them by praising them too highly, he replied, They are two hotheads, the one a Gascon, the other from Picardy. Both are easily excited, but they quiet down immediately. You have had a proof of that in what you have just related to me. This, too, was the opinion of Comminges, who withdrew somewhat reassured. Athos remained alone in the vast chamber, where, according to the cardinal's directions, he was treated with all the courtesy due to a nobleman. He awaited Mazarin's promised visit to get some light on his present situation. Chapter 83. Strength and Sagacity. Now let us pass the orangery to the hunting lodge. At the extremity of the courtyard, where, close to a portico formed of Ionic columns, were the dog kennels, rose an oblong building, the pavilion of the orangery, a half-circle, enclosing the court of honor. It was in this pavilion, on the ground floor, that D'Artagnan and Porthos were confined, suffering interminable hours of imprisonment in a manner suitable to each different temperament. D'Artagnan was pacing to and fro like a caged tiger, with dilated eyes, growling as he paced along by the bars of a window looking upon the yard of servants' offices. Porthos was ruminating over an excellent dinner he had just demolished. The one seemed to be deprived of reason, yet he was meditating. The other seemed to meditate, yet he was more than half asleep. But his sleep was a nightmare, which might be guessed by the incoherent manner in which he sometimes snored and sometimes snorted. "Look," said D'Artagnan, "day is declining. It must be nearly 4 o'clock. We have been in this place nearly 83 hours. "Hem," muttered Porthos, with a kind of pretense of answering. "Did you hear, eternal sleeper?" cried D'Artagnan, irritated that anyone could doze during the day, when he had the greatest difficulty in sleeping during the night. "What?" said Porthos. "I say we have been here 83 hours. "'Tis your fault," answered Porthos. "How my fault?" "Yes, I offered you escape." "By pulling out a bar and pushing down a door?" "Certainly." "Porthos, men like us can't go out from here purely and simply." "Faith," said Porthos, "as for me, I could go out with that purity and that simplicity which it seems to me you despise too much." D'Artagnan shrugged his shoulders. "And besides," he said, "going out of this chamber isn't all." "Dear friend," said Porthos, "you appear to be in a somewhat better humor today than you were yesterday. Explain to me why going out of this chamber isn't everything." "Because, having neither arms nor password, we shouldn't take 50 steps in the court without knocking against a sentinel." "Very well," said Porthos, "we will kill the sentinel and we shall have his arms." "Yes, but before we can kill him, and he will be hard to kill, that Swiss, he will shriek out and the whole picket will come, and we shall be taken like foxes, we who are lions, and thrown into some dungeon, where we shall not even have the consolation of seeing this frightful grey sky of Roule, which no more resembles the sky of Tarbes than the moon is like the sun. Lackaday! If we only had someone to instruct us about the physical and moral topography of this castle. When one thinks that for 20 years, during which time I did not know what to do with myself, it never occurred to me to come to study Roule." "What difference does that make?" said Porthos. "We shall go out all the same. Do you know, my dear fellow, why master pastry cooks never work with their hands?" "No," said Porthos, "but I should be glad to be informed." "It is because in the presence of their pupils they fear that some of their tarts or creams may turn out badly cooked." "What then?" "Why, then they would be laughed at, and a master pastry cook must never be laughed at." "And what have master pastry cooks to do with us?" "We ought, in our adventures, never to be defeated or give anyone a chance to laugh at us. In England lately we failed, we were beaten, and that is a blemish on our reputation." "By whom then were we beaten?" asked Porthos. "By Mordaunt." "Yes, but we have drowned Monsieur Mordaunt." "That is true, and that will redeem us a little in the eyes of posterity, if posterity ever looks at us. But listen, Porthos, though Monsieur Mordaunt was a man not to be despised, Mazarin is not less strong than he, and we shall not easily succeed in drowning him. We must, therefore, watch and play a close game, for," he added with a sigh, "we too are equal, perhaps, to 8 others, but we are not equal to the 4 that you know of." "That is true," said Porthos, echoing D'Artagnan's sigh. "Well, Porthos, follow my examples. Walk back and forth till some news of our friends reaches us or till we are visited by a good idea. But don't sleep as you do all the time. Nothing dulls the intellect like sleep. As to what may lie before us, it is perhaps less serious than we at first thought. I don't believe that Monsieur de Mazarin thinks of cutting off our heads, for heads are not taken off without previous trial. A trial would make a noise, and a noise would get the attention of our friends, who would check the operations of Monsieur de Mazarin." "How well you reason," said Porthos admiringly. "Well, yes, pretty well," replied D'Artagnan, "and besides, you see, if they put us on trial, if they cut off our heads, they must meanwhile either keep us here or transfer us elsewhere." "Yes, that is inevitable," said Porthos. "Well, it is impossible but that Master Aramis, that keen-scented bloodhound, and Athos, that wise and prudent nobleman, will discover our retreat. Then, believe me, it will be time to act. Yes, we will wait. We can wait the more contentedly that it is not absolutely bad here, but for one thing at least. What is that? Did you observe, D'Artagnan, that 3 days running they have brought us braised mutton? No, but if it occurs a 4th time I shall complain of it, so never mind. And then I feel the loss of my house. 'Tis a long time since I visited my castles. Forget them for a time. We shall return to them, unless Mazarin razes them to the ground. Do you think that likely? No, the other cardinal would have done so, but this one is too mean a fellow to risk it. You reconcile me, D'Artagnan. Well, then, assume a cheerful manner as I do. We must joke with the guards, we must gain the goodwill of the soldiers, since we can't corrupt them. Try, Porthos, to please them more than you are wont to do when they are under our windows. Thus far you have done nothing but show them your fist, and the more respectable your fist is, Porthos, the less attractive it is. Ah, I would give much to have 500 louis only. So would I, said Porthos, unwilling to be behind D'Artagnan in generosity. I would give as much as 100 pistoles. The 2 prisoners were at this point of their conversation when Comminges entered, preceded by a sergeant and 2 men, who brought supper in a basket with 2 handles, filled with basins and plates. What? Exclaimed Porthos. Mutton again? My dear Monsieur de Comminges, said D'Artagnan, you will find that my friend, Monsieur du Vallon, will go to the most fatal lengths if Cardinal Mazarin continues to provide us with this sort of meat, mutton every day. I declare, said Porthos, I shall eat nothing if they do not take it away. Remove the mutton, cried Comminges. I wish Monsieur du Vallon to sup well, more especially as I have news to give him that will improve his appetite. Is Mazarin dead? Asked Porthos. No, I am sorry to tell you he is perfectly well. So much the worse, said Porthos. What is that news? Asked D'Artagnan. News in prison is a fruit so rare that I trust, Monsieur de Comminges, you will excuse my impatience, the more eager since you have given us to understand that the news is good. Should you be glad to hear that the Comte de la Fère is well? Asked de Comminges. D'Artagnan's penetrating grey eyes were opened to the utmost. Glad, he cried, I should be more than glad. Happy, beyond measure. Well, I am desired by him to give you his compliments and to say that he is in good health. D'Artagnan almost leaped with joy. A quick glance conveyed his thought to Porthos. If Athos knows where we are, if he opens communication with us, before long Athos will act. Porthos was not very quick to understand the language of glances, but now since the name of Athos had suggested to him the same idea, he understood. Do you say, asked the Gascon timidly, that the Comte de la Fère has commissioned you to give his compliments to Monsieur du Vallon and myself? Yes, sir. Then you have seen him? Certainly I have. Where? If I may ask without indiscretion. Near here, replied de Comminges, smiling, so near that if the windows which look on the orangery were not stopped up you could see him from where you are. He is wandering about the environs of the castle, thought D'Artagnan. Then he said aloud, You met him, I dare say, in the park, hunting perhaps? No, nearer still. Look, behind this wall, said de Comminges, knocking against the wall. Behind this wall? What is there, then, behind this wall? I was brought here by night, so devil take me if I know where I am. Well, said Comminges, suppose one thing. I will suppose anything you please. Suppose there were a window in this wall. Well, from that window you would see Monsieur de la Fère at his. The Count, then, is in the chateau? Yes. For what reason? The same as yourself. Athos, a prisoner? You know well, replied de Comminges, that there are no prisoners at Rouen, because there is no prison. Don't let us play upon words, sir. Athos has been arrested. Yesterday at Saint-Germain, as he came out from the presence of the Queen. The arms of D'Artagnan fell powerless by his side. One might have supposed him thunderstruck. A paleness ran like a cloud over his dark skin, but disappeared immediately. A prisoner, he reiterated. A prisoner, repeated Porthos, quite dejected. Suddenly D'Artagnan looked up, and in his eyes there was a gleam which scarcely even Porthos observed, but it died away and he appeared more sorrowful than before. "Come, come," said Comminges, who, since D'Artagnan, on the day of Broussels' arrest, had saved him from the hands of the Parisians, had entertained a real affection for him, "don't be unhappy, I never thought of bringing you bad news. Laugh at the chance which has brought your friend near to you and Monsieur du Vallon, instead of being in the depths of despair about it." But D'Artagnan was still in a desponding mood. "And how did he look?" asked Porthos, who, perceiving that D'Artagnan had allowed the conversation to drop, profited by it to put in a word or two. "Very well indeed, sir," replied Comminges. "At first, like you, he seemed distressed, but when he heard that the cardinal was going to pay him a visit this very evening—" "Ah!" cried D'Artagnan, "the cardinal is about to visit the Comte de la Fère?" "Yes, and the count desired me to tell you that he should take advantage of this visit to plead for you and for himself." "Our dear count," said D'Artagnan. "A fine thing indeed," grunted Porthos. "A great favor. Sounds. Monsieur the Comte de la Fère, whose family is allied to the Montmorency and the Rohan, is easily the equal of Monsieur de Mazarin." "No matter," said D'Artagnan, in his most wheedling tone. "On reflection, my dear du Vallon, it is a great honor for the Comte de la Fère, and gives good reason to hope. In fact, it seems to me so great an honor for a prisoner that I think Monsieur de Comminges must be mistaken." "What? I am mistaken? Monsieur de Mazarin will not come to visit the Comte de la Fère, but the Comte de la Fère will be sent for to visit him." "No, no, no," said Comminges, who made a point of having the facts appear exactly as they were. "I clearly understood what the cardinal said to me. He will come and visit the Comte de la Fère." D'Artagnan tried to gather from the expression of his eyes whether Porthos understood the importance of that visit, but Porthos did not even look toward him. "It is, then, the cardinal's custom to walk in his orangery?" asked D'Artagnan. "Every evening he shuts himself in there. That, it seems, is where he meditates on state affairs." "In that case," said D'Artagnan, "I begin to believe that Monsieur de la Fère will receive the visit of His Eminence. He will, of course, have an escort." "Yes, 2 soldiers." "And will he talk thus of affairs in presence of 2 strangers? The soldiers are Swiss, who understand only German. Besides, according to all probability they will wait at the door." D'Artagnan made a violent effort over himself to keep his face from being too expressive. "Let the cardinal take care of going alone to visit the Comte de la Fère," said D'Artagnan, "for the count must be furious." Comminges began to laugh. Oh, why really one would say that you 4 were anthropophagi. The count is an affable man. Besides, he is unarmed. At the first word from His Eminence the 2 soldiers about him would run to his assistance." "2 soldiers," said D'Artagnan, seeming to remember something. "2 soldiers, yes. That, then, is why I hear 2 men called every evening and see them walking sometimes for half an hour, under my window. That is it. They are waiting for the cardinal, or rather for Bernouin, who comes to call them when the cardinal goes out." "Fine-looking men, upon my word," said D'Artagnan. "They belong to the regiment that was at Lens, which the prince assigned to the cardinal." "Ah, monsieur," said D'Artagnan, as if to sum up in a word all that conversation, "if only His Eminence would relent and grant to Monsieur de la Fère our liberty." "I wish it with all my heart," said Comminges. "Then, if he should forget that visit, you would find no inconvenience in reminding him of it?" "Not at all." "Ah, that gives me more confidence." This skillful turn of the conversation would have seemed a sublime maneuver to anyone who could have read the Gascon's soul. "Now," said D'Artagnan, "I've one last favor to ask of you, Monsieur de Comminges." "At your service, sir." "You will see the count again?" "Tomorrow morning." "Will you remember us to him and ask him to solicit for me the same favor that he will have obtained?" "You want the cardinal to come here?" "No, I know my place and am not so presumptuous. Let His Eminence do me the honor to give me a hearing. That is all I want." "Oh," muttered Porthos, shaking his head, "never should I have thought this of him. How misfortune humbles a man!" "I promise you it shall be done," answered de Comminges. "Tell the count that I am well, that you found me sad but resigned. I am pleased, sir, to hear that. And the same, also, for Monsieur du Vallon. Not for me, cried Porthos. I am not by any means resigned. But you will be resigned, my friend. Never. He will become so, monsieur. I know him better than he knows himself. Be silent, dear du Vallon, and resign yourself. Adieu, gentlemen, said de Comminges. Sleep well. We will try. De Comminges went away, D'Artagnan remaining apparently in the same attitude of humble resignation. But scarcely had he departed when he turned and clasped Porthos in his arms with an expression not to be doubted. Oh, cried Porthos, what's the matter now? Have you gone mad, my dear friend? What is the matter? Returned D'Artagnan. We are saved. I don't see that at all, answered Porthos. I think we are all taken prisoners, except Aramis, and that our chances of getting out are lessened since one more of us is caught in Mazarin's mousetrap. Which is far too strong for 2 of us, but not strong enough for 3 of us, returned D'Artagnan. I don't understand, said Porthos. Never mind, let's sit down to table and take something to strengthen us for the night. What are we to do then tonight? To travel, perhaps. But sit down, dear friend, to table. When one is eating, ideas flow easily. After supper, when they are perfected, I will communicate my plans to you. So Porthos sat down to table without another word and ate with an appetite that did honor to the confidence that was ever inspired in him by D'Artagnan's inventive imagination. Chapter 84. Strength and Sagacity, continued. Supper was eaten in silence, but not in sadness, for from time to time one of those sweet smiles which were habitual to him in moments of good humor illumined the face of D'Artagnan. Not a scintilla of these was lost on Porthos, and at every one he uttered an exclamation which betrayed to his friend that he had not lost sight of the idea which possessed his brain. At dessert D'Artagnan reposed in his chair, crossed one leg over the other and lounged about like a man perfectly at his ease. Porthos rested his chin on his hands, placed his elbows on the table and looked at D'Artagnan with an expression of confidence which imparted to that colossus an admirable appearance of good fellowship. Well, said D'Artagnan at last. Well, repeated Porthos. You were saying, my dear friend? No, I said nothing. Yes, you were saying you wished to leave this place. Ah, indeed. The will was never wanting. To get away you would not mind, you added, knocking down a door or a wall. 'Tis true, I said so, and I say it again. And I answered you, Porthos, that it was not a good plan, that we couldn't go 100 steps without being recaptured, because we were without clothes to disguise ourselves and arms to defend ourselves. That is true, we should need clothes and arms. Well, said D'Artagnan, rising, we have them, friend Porthos, and even something better. Bah, said Porthos, looking around. Useless to look, everything will come to us when wanted. At about what time did we see the 2 Swiss guards walking yesterday? An hour after sunset. If they go out today as they did yesterday, we shall have the honor, then, of seeing them in half an hour? In a quarter of an hour at most. Your arm is still strong enough, is it not, Porthos? Porthos unbuttoned his sleeve, raised his shirt and looked complacently on his strong arm, as large as the leg of any ordinary man. Yes, indeed, said he, I believe so. So that you could without trouble convert these tongs into a hoop and yonder shovel into a corkscrew? Certainly. And the giant took up these 2 articles, and without any apparent effort produced in them the metamorphoses suggested by his companion. There, he cried. Capital, exclaimed the Gascon. Really, Porthos, you are a gifted individual. I have heard speak, said Porthos, of a certain Milo of Crotona, who performed wonderful feats, such as binding his forehead with a cord and bursting it, of killing an ox with a blow of his fist and carrying it home on his shoulders, etc. I used to learn all these feat by heart yonder, down at Pierrefonds, and I have done all that he did except breaking a cord by the corrugation of my temples. Because your strength is not in your head, Porthos, said his friend. No, it is in my arms and shoulders, answered Porthos with gratified naivete. Well, my dear friend, let us approach the window and there you can match your strength against that of an iron bar. Porthos went to the window, took a bar in his hands, clung to it and bent it like a bow, so that the two ends came out of the sockets of stone in which for 30 years they had been fixed. Well, friend, the cardinal, although such a genius, could never have done that. Shall I take out any more of them? Asked Porthos. No, that is sufficient. A man can pass through that. Porthos tried, and passed the upper portion of his body through. Yes, he said. Now pass your arm through this opening. Why? You will know presently. Pass it. Porthos obeyed with military promptness and passed his arm through the opening. Admirable, said D'Artagnan. The scheme goes forward, it seems. On wheels, dear friend. Good. What shall I do now? Nothing. It is finished, then? No, not yet. I should like to understand, said Porthos. Listen, my dear friend. In 2 words you will know all. The door of the guardhouse opens, as you see. Yes, I see. They are about to send into our court, which Monsieur de Mazarin crosses on his way to the orangery, the 2 guards who attend him. There they are coming out. If only they close the guardhouse door. Could they close it? What then? Silence. They may hear us. I don't understand it at all. As you execute you will understand. And yet I should have preferred. You will have the pleasure of the surprise. Ah, that is true. Hush. Porthos remained silent and motionless. In fact, the 2 soldiers advanced on the side where the window was, rubbing their hands, for it was cold, it being the month of February. At this moment the door of the guardhouse was opened and one of the soldiers was summoned away. Now, said D'Artagnan, I am going to call this soldier and talk to him. Don't lose a word of what I'm going to say to you, Porthos. Everything lies in the execution. Good, the execution of plots is my forte. I know it well. I depend on you. Look, I shall turn to the left, so that the soldier will be at your right, as soon as he mounts on the bench to talk to us. But supposing he doesn't mount? He will, rely upon it. As soon as you see him get up, stretch out your arm and seize him by the neck. Then, raising him up as Tobit raised the fish by the gills, you must pull him into the room, taking care to squeeze him so tight that he can't cry out. Oh, said Porthos. Suppose I happen to strangle him? To be sure there would only be a Swiss the less in the world, but you will not do so, I hope. Lay him down here, we'll gag him and tie him, no matter where, somewhere. So we shall get from him 1 uniform and a sword. Marvelous, exclaimed Porthos, looking at the Gascon with the most profound admiration. Pooh, replied D'Artagnan. Yes, said Porthos, recollecting himself, but 1 uniform and 1 sword will not suffice for 2. Well, but there's his comrade. True, said Porthos. Therefore, when I cough, stretch out your arm. Good. The 2 friends then placed themselves as they had agreed, Porthos being completely hidden in an angle of the window. Good evening, comrade, said D'Artagnan in his most fascinating voice and manner. Good evening, sir, answered the soldier, in a strong provincial accent. 'Tis not too warm to walk, resumed D'Artagnan. No, sir. And I think a glass of wine will not be disagreeable to you? A glass of wine will be extremely welcome. The fish bites, whispered the Gascon to Porthos. I understand, said Porthos. A bottle, perhaps? A whole bottle? Yes, sir. A whole bottle, if you will drink my health. Willingly, answered the soldier. Come then and take it, friend, said the Gascon. With all my heart. How convenient that there's a bench here. Egad, one would think it had been placed here on purpose. Get on it, that's it, friend. And D'Artagnan coughed. That instant the arm of Porthos fell. His hand of iron grasped, quick as lightning, firm as a pair of blacksmith's pincers, the soldier's throat. He raised him, almost stifling him as he drew him through the aperture, at the risk of flaying him in the passage. He then laid him down on the floor, where D'Artagnan, after giving him just time enough to draw his breath, gagged him with his long scarf, and the moment he had done so began to undress him with the promptitude and dexterity of a man who had learned his business on the field of battle. Then the soldier, gagged and bound, was placed upon the hearth, the fire of which had been previously extinguished by the 2 friends. Here's a sword and a dress, said Porthos. I take them, said D'Artagnan, for myself. If you want another uniform and sword you must play the same trick over again. I see the other soldier issue from the guardroom and come toward us. I think, replied Porthos, it would be imprudent to attempt the same maneuver again. It is said that no man can succeed twice in the same way, and a failure would be ruinous. No, I will go down, seize the man unawares and bring him to you ready gagged. That is better, said the Gascon. Be ready, said Porthos as he slipped through the opening. He did as he said. Porthos seized his opportunity, caught the next soldier by his neck, gagged him and pushed him like a mummy through the bars into the room and entered after him. Then they undressed him as they had done the first, laid him on their bed and bound him with the straps which composed the bed, the bedstead being of oak. This operation proved as great a success as the first. There, said D'Artagnan, this is capital. Now let me try on the dress of yonder chap Porthos. I doubt if you can wear it, but should it be too tight, never mind, you can wear the breastplate and the hat with the red feathers. It happened, however, that the second soldier was a Swiss of gigantic proportions, so, save that some few of the seams split, his uniform fitted Porthos perfectly. They then dressed themselves. "'Tis done!" they both exclaimed at once. "As to you, comrades," they said to the men, "nothing will happen to you if you are discreet, but if you stir you are dead men." The soldiers were complaisant. They had found the grasp of Porthos pretty powerful and that it was no joke to fight against it. "Now," said D'Artagnan, "you wouldn't be sorry to understand the plot, would you, Porthos?" "Well, no, not very." "Well, then we shall go down into the court." "Yes." "We shall take the place of those two fellows." "Well." "We will walk back and forth." "That's a good idea, for it isn't warm." "In a moment the valet de chambre will call the guard, as he did yesterday and the day before." "And we shall answer?" "No, on the contrary, we shall not answer." "As you please, I don't insist on answering." "We will not answer, then. We will simply settle our hats on our heads and we will escort His Eminence." "Where shall we escort him?" "Where he is going, to visit Athos." "Do you think Athos will be sorry to see us?" "Oh," cried Porthos, "oh, I understand." "Wait a little, Porthos, before crying out, for, on my word, you haven't reached the end," said the Gascon in a jesting tone. "What is to happen?" said Porthos. "Follow me," replied D'Artagnan. "The man who lives to see shall see." And slipping through the aperture, he alighted in the court. Porthos followed him by the same road, but with more difficulty and less diligence. They could hear the two soldiers shivering with fear as they lay bound in the chamber. Scarcely had the two Frenchmen touched the ground when a door opened and the voice of the valet de chambre called out, "Make ready!" At the same moment the guardhouse was opened and a voice called out, "La Bruyere and Du Barthois, march!" "It seems that I am named La Bruyere," remarked D'Artagnan. "And I, Du Barthois," added Porthos. "Where are you?" asked the valet de chambre, whose eyes, dazzled by the light, could not clearly distinguish our heroes in the gloom. "Here we are," said the Gascon. "What say you to that, Monsieur du Vallon?" he added in a low tone to Porthos. "If it but lasts, most capital," responded Porthos. These two newly enlisted soldiers marched gravely after the valet de chambre, who opened the door of the vestibule, then another which seemed to be that of a waiting room, and showing them two stools. "Your orders are very simple," he said. "Don't allow anybody, except one person, to enter here. Do you hear? Not a single creature. Obey that person implicitly. On your return you cannot make a mistake. You have only to wait here till I release you." D'Artagnan was known to this valet de chambre, who was no other than Bernouin, and he had during the last 6 or 8 months introduced the Gascon a dozen times to the cardinal. The Gascon, therefore, instead of answering, growled out, "Ja, ja," in the most German and the least Gascon accent possible. As for Porthos, on whom D'Artagnan had impressed the necessity of absolute silence, and who did not even now begin to comprehend the scheme of his friend, which was to follow Mazarin in his visit to Athos, he was simply mute. All that he was allowed to say, in case of emergencies, was the proverbial Der Teufel. Bernouin shut the door and went away. When Porthos heard the key turn in the lock, he began to be alarmed, lest they should only have exchanged one prison for another. "Porthos, my friend," said D'Artagnan, "don't distrust Providence. Let me meditate and consider." "Meditate and consider as much as you like," replied Porthos, who was now quite out of humor at seeing things take this turn. "We have walked 8 paces," whispered D'Artagnan, "and gone up 6 steps, so hereabouts is the pavilion called the Pavilion of the Orangery. The Comte de la Fere cannot be far off, only the doors are locked." "That is a slight difficulty," said Porthos, "and a good push with the shoulders. For God's sake, Porthos, my friend, reserve your feats of strength, or they will not have, when needed, the honor they deserve. Have you not heard that someone is coming here?" "Yes." "Well, that someone will open the doors." "But, my dear fellow, if that someone recognizes us, if that someone cries out, we are lost, for you don't propose, I imagine, that I shall kill that man of the church. That might do if we were dealing with Englishmen or Germans." "Oh, may God keep me from it, and you too," said D'Artagnan. "The young king would, perhaps, show us some gratitude, but the queen would never forgive us, and it is she whom we have to consider. And then, besides, the useless blood. Never, no, never. I have my plan, let me carry it out and we shall laugh." "So much the better," said Porthos. "I feel some need of it." "Hush," said D'Artagnan, "the someone is coming." The sound of a light step was heard in the vestibule. The hinges of the door creaked, and a man appeared in the dress of a cavalier, wrapped in a brown cloak, with a lantern in one hand and a large beaver hat pulled down over his eyes. Porthos effaced himself against the wall, but he could not render himself invisible, and the man in the cloak said to him, giving him his lantern, "Light the lamp which hangs from the ceiling." Then, addressing D'Artagnan, "You know the watchword?" he said. "Ja," replied the Gascon, determined to confine himself to this specimen of the German tongue. "Tedesco," answered the cavalier, "Vivin." And advancing toward the door opposite to that by which he came in, he opened it and disappeared behind it, shutting it as he went. "Now," asked Porthos, "what are we to do?" "Now we shall make use of your shoulder, friend Porthos, if this door proves to be locked. Everything in its proper time, and all comes right to those who know how to wait patiently. But first barricade the first door well, then we will follow yonder cavalier." The two friends set to work and crowded the space before the door with all the furniture in the room, as not only to make the passage impassable, but so to block the door that by no means could it open inward. "There," said D'Artagnan, "we can't be overtaken. Come forward." Chapter 85. The Oubliettes of Cardinal Mazarin. At first, on arriving at the door through which Mazarin had passed, D'Artagnan tried in vain to open it, but on the powerful shoulder of Porthos being applied to one of the panels, which gave way, D'Artagnan introduced the point of his sword between the bolt and the staple of the lock. The bolt gave way and the door opened. As I told you, everything can be attained, Porthos, women and doors, by proceeding with gentleness. "You're a great moralist, and that's the fact," said Porthos. They entered, behind a glass window, by the light of the cardinal's lantern, which had been placed on the floor in the midst of the gallery. They saw the orange and pomegranate trees of the castle of Rouen, in long lines, forming one great alley and 2 smaller side alleys. "No cardinal," said D'Artagnan, "but only his lantern. Where the devil, then, is he?" Exploring, however, one of the side wings of the gallery, after making a sign to Porthos to explore the other, he saw, all at once, at his left, a tub containing an orange tree, which had been pushed out of its place, and in its place an open aperture. 10 men would have found difficulty in moving that tub, but by some mechanical contrivance it had turned with the flagstone on which it rested. D'Artagnan, as we have said, perceived a hole in that place, and in this hole the steps of a winding staircase. He called Porthos to look at it. "Were our object money only," he said, "we should be rich directly." "How's that? Don't you understand, Porthos? At the bottom of that staircase lies, probably, the cardinal's treasury of which folk tell such wonders, and we should only have to descend, empty a chest, shut the cardinal up in it, double lock it, go away, carrying off as much gold as we could, put back this orange tree over the place, and no one in the world would ever ask us where our fortune came from, not even the cardinal. It would be a happy hit for clowns to make, but as it seems to be unworthy of two gentlemen, said Porthos. So I think, and therefore I said, were our object money only, but we want something else, replied the Gascon. At the same moment, whilst D'Artagnan was leaning over the aperture to listen, a metallic sound, as if someone was moving a bag of gold, struck on his ear. He started. Instantly afterward a door opened and a light played upon the staircase. Mazarin had left his lamp in the gallery to make people believe that he was walking about, but he had with him a wax light to help him to explore his mysterious strong box. "Faith," he said in Italian as he was reascending the steps and looking at a bag of reals, "Faith, there's enough to pay 5 councillors of Parliament and 2 generals in Paris. I am a great captain, that I am. But I make war in my own way." The two friends were crouching down, meantime, behind a tub in the side alley. Mazarin came within 3 steps of D'Artagnan and pushed a spring in the wall. The slab turned and the orange tree resumed its place. Then the cardinal put out the waxlight, slipped it into his pocket, and taking up the lantern, "Now," he said, "for Monsieur de la Fère." "Very good," thought D'Artagnan, "'tis our road likewise, we will go together." All 3 set off on their walk, Mazarin taking the middle alley and the friends the side ones. The cardinal reached a second door without perceiving he was being followed. The sand with which the alleys were covered deadened the sound of footsteps. He then turned to the left, down a corridor which had escaped the attention of the 2 friends, but as he opened the door he paused, as if in thought. "Diavolo," he exclaimed, "I forgot the recommendation of de Comminges, who advised me to take a guard and place it at this door, in order not to put myself at the mercy of that 4-headed combination of devils." And with a movement of impatience he turned to retrace his steps. "Do not give yourself the trouble, my lord," said D'Artagnan, with his right foot forward, his beaver in his hand, a smile on his face. "We have followed your eminence step by step, and here we are." "Yes, here we are," said Porthos. And he made the same friendly salute as D'Artagnan. Mazarin gazed at each of them with an affrighted stare, recognized them, and let drop his lantern, uttering a cry of terror. D'Artagnan picked it up. By good luck it had not been extinguished. "Oh, what imprudence, my lord," said D'Artagnan. "'Tis not good to be about just here without a light. Your eminence might knock against something, or fall into a hole." "Monsieur d'Artagnan," muttered Mazarin, unable to recover from his astonishment. "Yes, my lord, it is I. I have the honor to present to you Monsieur du Vallon, that excellent friend of mine, in whom your eminence had the kindness to interest yourself formerly." And D'Artagnan held the lamp before the merry face of Porthos, who now began to comprehend the affair and be very proud of the whole undertaking. "You are going to visit Monsieur de la Fère?" said D'Artagnan. "Don't let us disarrange your eminence. Be so good as to show us the way, and we will follow you." Mazarin was by degrees recovering his senses. "Have you been long in the orangery?" he asked in a trembling voice, remembering the visits he had been paying to his treasury. Porthos opened his mouth to reply. D'Artagnan made him a sign, and his mouth, remaining silent, gradually closed. "This moment come, my lord," said D'Artagnan. Mazarin breathed again. His fears were now no longer for his hoard, but for himself. A sort of smile played on his lips. "Come," he said, "you have me in a snare, gentlemen. I confess myself conquered. You wish to ask for liberty, and I give it you." "Oh, my lord," answered D'Artagnan, "you are too good. As to our liberty, we have that. We want to ask something else of you." "You have your liberty?" repeated Mazarin in terror. "Certainly, and on the other hand, my lord, you have lost it, and now, in accordance with the law of war, sir, you must buy it back again." Mazarin felt a shiver run through him, a chill even to his heart's core. His piercing look was fixed in vain on the satirical face of the Gascon and the unchanging countenance of Porthos. Both were in shadow, and the Sibyl of Cuma herself could not have read them. "To purchase back my liberty?" said the cardinal. "Yes, my lord." "And how much will that cost me, Monsieur d'Artagnan?" "Zounds, my lord, I don't know yet. We must ask the Comte de la Fère the question. Will your eminence deign to open the door which leads to the count's room, and in 10 minutes all will be settled." Mazarin started. "My lord," said D'Artagnan, "your eminence sees that we wish to act with all formality and due respect. But I must warn you that we have no time to lose. Open the door then, my lord, and be so good as to remember, once for all, that on the slightest attempt to escape or the faintest cry for help, our position being very critical indeed, you must not be angry with us if we go to extremities." "Be assured," answered Mazarin, "that I shall attempt nothing. I give you my word of honor." D'Artagnan made a sign to Porthos to redouble his watchfulness. Then turning to Mazarin, "Now, my lord, let us enter, if you please." Chapter 86. Conferences. Mazarin turned the lock of a double door, on the threshold of which they found Athos ready to receive his illustrious guests according to the notice Comminges had given him. On perceiving Mazarin he bowed. "Your Eminence," he said, "might have dispensed with your attendance. The honor bestowed on me is too great for me to be unmindful of it." "And so, my dear Count," said D'Artagnan, "His Eminence didn't actually insist on our attending him. It is Du Vallon and I who have insisted, and even in a manner somewhat impolite, perhaps, so great was our longing to see you." At that voice, that mocking tone, and that familiar gesture accenting voice and tone, Athos made a bound of surprise. "D'Artagnan! Porthos!" he exclaimed. "My very self, dear friend." "Me also," repeated Porthos. "What means this?" asked the Count. "It means," replied Mazarin, trying to smile and biting his lips in the attempt, "that our parts are changed, and that instead of these gentlemen being my prisoners I am theirs. But, gentlemen, I warn you, unless you kill me, your victory will be of very short duration. People will come to the rescue." "My lord," cried the Gascon, "don't threaten. 'Tis a bad example. We are so good and gentle to your Eminence. Come, let us put aside all rancor and talk pleasantly." "There's nothing I wish more," replied Mazarin. "But don't think yourselves in a better position than you are. In ensnaring me you have fallen into the trap yourselves. How are you to get away from here? Remember the soldiers and sentinels who guard these doors. Now, I am going to show you how sincere I am." "Good," thought D'Artagnan, "we must look about us. He's going to play us a trick." "I offered you your liberty," continued the minister. "Will you take it? Before an hour has passed you will be discovered, arrested, obliged to kill me, which would be a crime unworthy of loyal gentlemen like you." "He is right," thought Athos. And, like every other reflection passing in a mind that entertained none but noble thoughts, this feeling was expressed in his eyes. "And therefore," said D'Artagnan, to clip the hope which Athos's tacit adhesion had imparted to Mazarin, "we shall not proceed to that violence save in the last extremity." "If on the contrary," resumed Mazarin, "you accept your liberty, why you, my lord, might take it away from us in less than 5 minutes afterward, and from my knowledge of you I believe you will so take it away from us." "No, on the faith of a cardinal." "You do not believe me?" "My lord, I never believe cardinals who are not priests." "Well, on the faith of a minister." "You are no longer a minister, my lord, you are a prisoner." "Then, on the honor of a Mazarin, as I am and ever shall be, I hope," said the cardinal. "Hem," replied D'Artagnan. "I have heard speak of a Mazarin who had not much religion when his oaths were in question. I fear he may have been an ancestor of your Eminence. Monsieur D'Artagnan, you are a great wit and I am really sorry to be on bad terms with you. My lord, let us come to terms, I ask nothing better." "Very well," said Mazarin, "if I place you in security, in a manner evident, palpable—" "That is another thing," said Porthos. "Let us see," said Athos. "Let us see," said D'Artagnan. "In the first place, do you accept?" asked the cardinal. "Unfold your plan, my lord, and we will see. Take notice that you are shut up, captured. You well know, my lord, that there always remains to us a last resource." "What?" "That of dying together." Mazarin shuddered. "Listen," he said, "at the end of yonder corridor is a door, of which I have the key. It leads into the park. Go, and take this key with you. You are active, vigorous, and you have arms. At 100 steps, on turning to the left, you will find the wall of the park. Get over it, and in 3 leaps you will be on the road and free." "By Jove, my lord," said D'Artagnan, "you have well said, but these are only words. Where is the key you speak of?" "Here it is." "Ah, my lord, you will conduct us yourself, then, to that door?" "Very willingly, if it be necessary to reassure you," answered the minister, and Mazarin, who was delighted to get off so cheaply, led the way, in high spirits, to the corridor and opened the door. It led into the park, as the 3 fugitives perceived by the night breeze which rushed into the corridor and blew the wind into their faces. "The devil!" exclaimed the Gascon, "'tis a dreadful night, my lord. We don't know the locality, and shall never find the wall. Since your eminence has come so far, come a few steps further. Conduct us, my lord, to the wall." "Be it so," replied the cardinal, and walking in a straight line he went to the wall, at the foot of which they all 4 arrived at the same instant. "Are you satisfied, gentlemen?" asked Mazarin. "I think so, indeed. We should be hard to please if we were not." "Deuce take it. 3 poor gentlemen escorted by a prince of the church. Apropos, my lord, you remarked that we were all active, vigorous, and armed." "Yes." "You are mistaken. Monsieur du Vallon and I are the only 2 who are armed. The count is not, and should we meet with one of your patrol we must defend ourselves." "'Tis true." "Where can we find another sword?" asked Porthos. "My lord," said D'Artagnan, "will lend his, which is of no use to him, to the Comte de la Fère." "Willingly," said the cardinal. "I will even ask the count to keep it for my sake." "I promise you, my lord, never to part with it," replied Athos. "Well, well," cried D'Artagnan, "this reconciliation is truly touching. Have you not tears in your eyes, Porthos?" "Yes," said Porthos, "but I do not know if it is feeling or the wind that makes me weep. I think it is the wind." "Now climb up, Athos, quickly," said D'Artagnan. Athos, assisted by Porthos, who lifted him up like a feather, arrived at the top. "Now jump down, Athos." Athos jumped and disappeared on the other side of the wall. "Are you on the ground?" asked D'Artagnan. "Yes." "Without accident?" "Perfectly safe and sound." "Porthos, whilst I get up, watch the cardinal." "No, I don't want your help, watch the cardinal." "I am watching," said Porthos. "Well, you are right, it is more difficult than I thought. Lend me your back, but don't let the cardinal go." Porthos lent him his back and D'Artagnan was soon on the summit of the wall, where he seated himself. Mazarin pretended to laugh. "Are you there?" asked Porthos. "Yes, my friend, and now—" "Now what?" asked Porthos. "Now give me the cardinal up here. If he makes any noise, stifle him." Mazarin wished to call out, but Porthos held him tight and passed him to D'Artagnan, who seized him by the neck and made him sit down by him. Then, in a menacing tone, he said, "Sir, jump directly down, close to Monsieur de la Fère, or, on the honor of a gentleman, I'll kill you." "Monsieur, monsieur," cried Mazarin, "you are breaking your word to me." Did I promise you anything, my lord?" Mazarin groaned. "You are free," he said. "Through me, your liberty was my ransom." "Agreed, but the ransom of that immense treasure buried under the gallery, to which one descends on pushing a spring hidden in the wall, which causes a tub to turn, revealing a staircase. Must not one speak of that a little, my lord?" "Diavolo!" cried Mazarin, almost choked and clasping his hands. "I am a lost and ruined man." But without listening to his protestations of alarm, D'Artagnan slipped him gently down into the arms of Athos, who stood immovable at the bottom of the wall. Porthos next made an effort which shook the solid wall, and by the aid of his friend's hand gained the summit. "I didn't understand it all," he said, "but I understand now. How droll it is!" "You think so? So much the better, but that it may prove laughter-worthy even to the end, let us not lose time." And he jumped off the wall. Porthos did the same. "Attend to Monsieur le Cardinal, gentlemen," said D'Artagnan. "For myself, I will reconnoiter." The Gascon then drew his sword and marched as avant-guard. "My lord," he said, "which way do we go? Think well of your reply, for should your eminence be mistaken, there might ensue most grave results for all of us." "Along the wall, sir," said Mazarin, "there will be no danger of losing yourselves." The three friends hastened on, but in a short time were obliged to slacken the pace. The cardinal could not keep up with them, though with every wish to do so. Suddenly D'Artagnan touched something warm, which moved. "Stop! A horse!" he cried. "I have found a horse." "And I likewise," said Athos. "I, too," said Porthos, who, faithful to the instructions, still held the cardinal's arm. "There's luck, my lord, just as you were complaining of being tired and obliged to walk." But as he spoke, the barrel of a pistol was presented at his breast, and these words were pronounced, "Touch it not." "Grimaud," he cried, "Grimaud, what art thou about? Why, thou art posted here by heaven." "No, sir," said the honest servant, "it was Monsieur Aramis who posted me here to take care of the horses." "Is Aramis here?" "Yes, sir, he has been here since yesterday." "What are you doing?" "On the watch." "What? Aramis here?" cried Athos. "At the lesser gate of the castle, he's posted there." "Are you a large party?" 60. "Let him know." "This moment, sir." And believing that no one could execute the commission better than himself, Grimaud set off at full speed, whilst, enchanted at being all together again, the friends awaited his return. There was no one in the whole group in a bad humor except Cardinal Mazarin. Chapter 87. Thinking that Porthos will be at last a baron, and D'Artagnan a captain. At the expiration of 10 minutes Aramis arrived, accompanied by Grimaud and 8 or 10 followers. He was excessively delighted and threw himself into his friend's arms. "You are free, my brothers, free without my aid, and I shall have succeeded in doing nothing for you in spite of all my efforts. Do not be unhappy, dear friend, on that account. If you have done nothing as yet, you will do something soon," replied Athos. "I had well concerted my plans," pursued Aramis. "The coadjutor gave me 60 men, 20 guard the walls of the park, 20 the road from Rouen to Saint-Germain, 20 are dispersed in the woods. Thus I was able, thanks to the strategic disposition of my forces, to intercept 2 couriers from Mazarin to the Queen." Mazarin listened intently. "But," said D'Artagnan, "I trust that you honorably sent them back to Monsieur le Cardinal." "Ah, yes," said Aramis, "toward him I should be very likely to practice such delicacy of sentiment. In one of the dispatches the cardinal declares to the Queen that the treasury is empty and that Her Majesty has no more money. In the other he announces that he is about to transport his prisoners to Melun, since Rouen seemed to him not sufficiently secure. You can understand, dear friend, with what hope I was inspired by that last letter. I placed myself in ambuscade with my 60 men, I encircled the castle. The riding horses I entrusted to Grimaud, and I awaited your coming out, which I did not expect till tomorrow, and I didn't hope to free you without a skirmish. You are free tonight without fighting, so much the better. How did you manage to escape that scoundrel Mazarin? You must have much reason to complain of him." "Not very much," said D'Artagnan. "Really, I might even say that we have some reason to praise him." "Impossible." "Yes, really. It is owing to him that we are free." "Owing to him?" "Yes, he had us conducted into the orangery by Monsieur Bernin, his valet de chambre, and from there we followed him to visit the Comte de la Fere. Then he offered us our liberty and we accepted it. He even went so far as to show us the way out. He led us to the park wall, which we climbed over without accident, and then we fell in with Grimaud." "Well," exclaimed Aramis, "this will reconcile me to him. But I wish he were here that I might tell him that I did not believe him capable of so noble an act." "My lord," said D'Artagnan, no longer able to contain himself, "allow me to introduce to you the Chevalier d'Herblay, who wishes, as you may have heard, to offer his congratulations to your eminence." And he retired, discovering Mazarin, who was in great confusion, to the astonished gaze of Aramis. "Ho! Ho!" exclaimed the latter, "the cardinal! A glorious prize! Halloo! Halloo! Friends, to horse! To horse!" Several horsemen ran quickly to him. "Zounds!" cried Aramis, "I may have done some good, so, my lord, deign to receive my most respectful homage. I will lay a wager that 'twas that Saint Christopher, Porthos, who performed this feat. Apropos, I forgot, and he gave some orders in a low voice to one of the horsemen. I think it will be wise to set off, said D'Artagnan. Yes, but I am expecting someone, a friend of Athos. A friend, exclaimed the Count. And here he comes, by Jupiter, galloping through the bushes. The Count! The Count! Cried a young voice that made Athos start. Raoul! He ejaculated. For one moment the young man forgot his habitual respect. He threw himself on his father's neck. Look, my Lord Cardinal, said Aramis, would it not have been a pity to have separated men who love each other as we love? Gentlemen, he continued, addressing the cavaliers, who became more and more numerous every instant, gentlemen, encircle his eminence, that you may show him the greater honor. He will, indeed, give us the favor of his company. You will, I hope, be grateful for it. Porthos, do not lose sight of his eminence. Aramis then joined Athos and D'Artagnan, who were consulting together. Come, said D'Artagnan, after a conference of 5 minutes' duration, let us begin our journey. Where are we to go? Asked Porthos. To your house, dear Porthos, at Pierrefonds. Your fine chateau is worthy of affording its princely hospitality to his eminence. It is, likewise, well situated, neither too near Paris nor too far from it. We can establish a communication between it and the capital with great facility. Come, my lord, you shall be treated like a prince, as you are. A fallen prince, exclaimed Mazarin, piteously. The chances of war, said Athos, are many, but be assured we shall take no improper advantage of them. No, but we shall make use of them, said D'Artagnan. The rest of the night was employed by these cavaliers in traveling with the wonderful rapidity of former days. Mazarin, still somber and pensive, permitted himself to be dragged along in this way. It looked a race of phantoms. At dawn 12 leagues had been passed without drawing rein. Half the escort were exhausted and several horses fell down. Horses, nowadays, are not what they were formerly, observed Porthos. Everything degenerates. I have sent Grimaud to Dammartin, said Aramis. He is to bring us 5 fresh horses, 1 for his eminence, 4 for us. We, at least, must keep close to Monseigneur. The rest of the start will rejoin us later. Once beyond St. Denis we shall have nothing to fear. Grimaud, in fact, brought back 5 horses. The nobleman to whom he applied, being a friend of Porthos, was very ready, not to sell them, as was proposed, but to lend them. 10 minutes later the escort stopped at Ermenonville, but the 4 friends went on with well-sustained ardor, guarding Mazarin carefully. At noon they rode into the avenue of Pierrefonds. Ah, said Mousqueton, who had ridden by the side of D'Artagnan without speaking a word on the journey, you may think what you will, sir, but I can breathe now for the first time since my departure from Pierrefonds. And he put his horse to a gallop to announce to the other servants the arrival of Monsieur du Vallon and his friends. We are 4 of us, said D'Artagnan. We must relieve each other in mounting guard over my lord, and each of us must watch 3 hours at a time. Athos is going to examine the castle, which it will be necessary to render impregnable in case of siege. Porthos will see to the provisions and Aramis to the troops of the garrison. That is to say, Athos will be chief engineer, Porthos purveyor in general, and Aramis governor of the fortress. Meanwhile, they gave up to Mazarin the handsomest room in the chateau. Gentlemen, he said when he was in his room, you do not expect, I presume, to keep me here a long time incognito? No, my lord, replied the Gascon. On the contrary, we think of announcing very soon that we have you here. Then you will be besieged. We expect it. And what shall you do? Defend ourselves. Were the late Cardinal Richelieu alive, he would tell you a certain story of the bastion Saint-Gervais, which we 4, with our 4 lackeys and 12 dead men, held out against a whole army. Such feats, sir, are done once, and never repeated. However, nowadays there's no need of so much heroism. Tomorrow the army of Paris will be summoned, the day after it will be here. The field of battle, instead, therefore, of being at St. Denis or at Charenton, will be near Compiègne or Villers-Cotterets. The prince will vanquish you as he has always done. 'Tis possible, my lord, but before an engagement ensues we shall move your eminence to another castle belonging to our friend du Vallon, who has 3. We will not expose your eminence to the chances of war." "Come," answered Mazarin, "I see it will be necessary for me to capitulate." "Before a siege?" "Yes, the conditions will be better than afterward." My lord, as to conditions, you would soon see how moderate and reasonable we are." "Come, now, what are your conditions?" "Rest yourself first, my lord, and we will reflect." "I do not need rest, gentlemen. I need to know whether I am among enemies or friends." "Friends, my lord." "Friends. Well, then, tell me at once what you want, that I may see if any arrangement be possible." "Speak, Comte de la Fere." "My lord," replied Athos, "for myself I have nothing to demand. For France, were I to specify my wishes, I should have too much. I beg you to excuse me and propose to the Chevalier." And Athos, bowing, retired and remained leaning against the mantelpiece, a spectator of the scene. "Speak, then, Chevalier," said the cardinal. "What do you want?" "Nothing ambiguous, if you please. Be clear, short, and precise." "As for me," replied Aramis, "I have in my pocket the very program of the conditions which the deputation, of which I formed one, went yesterday to Saint-Germain to impose on you. Let us consider first the ancient rights. The demands in that program must be granted." "We were almost agreed on those," replied Mazarin. "Let us pass on to private and personal stipulations." "You suppose, then, that there are some?" said Aramis, smiling. "I do not suppose that you will all be quite so disinterested as Monsieur de la Fere," replied the cardinal, bowing to Athos. "My lord, you are right, and I am glad to see that you do justice to the Count at last. The Count has a mind above vulgar desires and earthly passions. He is a proud soul, he is a man by himself. You are right, he is worth us all, and we avow it to you." "Aramis," said Athos, "are you jesting?" "No, no, dear friend, I state only what we all know. You are right, it is not you alone this matter concerns, but my lord and his unworthy servant, myself." "Well, then, what do you require besides the general conditions before recited?" "I require, my lord, that Normandy should be given to Madame de Longueville, with 500,000 francs and full absolution. I require that His Majesty should deign to be godfather to the child she has just born, and that my lord, after having been present at the christening, should go to proffer his homage to our Holy Father the Pope. That is, you wish me to lay aside my ministerial functions, to quit France and be in exile. I wish His Eminence to become Pope on the first opportunity, allowing me then the right of demanding full indulgences for myself and my friends." Mazarin made a grimace which was quite indescribable, and then turned to D'Artagnan. "And you, sir?" he said. "I, my lord," answered the Gascon, "I differ from Monsieur Herblay entirely as to the last point, though I agree with him on the first. Far from wishing my lord to quit Paris, I hope he will stay there and continue to be prime minister, as he is a great statesman. I shall try also to help him to down the Fronde, but on one condition, that he sometimes remembers the king's faithful servants and gives the first vacant company of musketeers to a man that I could name. And you, Monsieur du Vallon?" "Yes, you, sir." "Speak, if you please," said Mazarin. "As for me," answered Porthos, "I wish my lord cardinal, in order to do honor to my house, which gives him an asylum, would in remembrance of this adventure erect my estate into a barony, with a promise to confer that order on one of my particular friends, whenever His Majesty next creates peers. You know, sir, that before receiving the order one must submit proofs. My friends will submit them. Besides, should it be necessary, Monseigneur will show him how that formality may be avoided." Mazarin bit his lips. The blow was direct, and he replied rather dryly, "All this appears to me to be ill-conceived, disjointed, gentlemen, for if I satisfy some I shall displease others. If I stay in Paris, I cannot go to Rome. If I became pope, I could not continue to be prime minister, and it is only by continuing prime minister that I can make Monsieur d'Artagnan a captain and Monsieur du Vallon a baron." "True," said Aramis. "So, as I am in a minority, I withdraw my proposition, so far as it relates to the voyage to Rome and Monseigneur's resignation." "I am to remain minister, then?" said Mazarin. "You remain minister," "That is understood," said D'Artagnan. "France needs you." "And I desist from my pretensions," said Aramis. "His Eminence will continue to be Prime Minister and Her Majesty's favorite, if he will grant to me and my friends what we demand for France and for ourselves. Occupy yourselves with your own affairs, gentlemen, and let France settle matters as she will with me," resumed Mazarin. "Ho! Ho!" replied Aramis. "The Frondeurs will have a treaty and your Eminence must sign it before us, promising at the same time to obtain the Queen's consent to it." "I can answer only for myself," said Mazarin. "I cannot answer for the Queen. Suppose Her Majesty refuses?" "Oh," said D'Artagnan, "Monseigneur knows very well that Her Majesty refuses him nothing." "Here, Monseigneur," said Aramis, "is the treaty proposed by the deputation of Frondeurs. Will your Eminence please read and examine?" "I am acquainted with it." "Sign it then. Reflect, gentlemen, that a signature given under circumstances like the present might be regarded as extorted by violence. Monseigneur will be at hand to testify that it was freely given. Suppose I refuse?" "Then," said D'Artagnan, "your Eminence must expect the consequences of a refusal. Would you dare to touch a cardinal? You have dared, my lord, to imprison Her Majesty's musketeers. The Queen will revenge me, gentlemen." "I do not think so, although inclination might lead her to do so, but we shall take your Eminence to Paris, and the Parisians will defend us." "How uneasy they must be at this moment at Rouen and Saint-Germain," said Aramis. "How they must be asking, 'Where is the cardinal? What has become of the minister? Where has the favorite gone?' How they must be looking for Monseigneur in all corners. What comments must be made, and if the Fronde knows that Monseigneur has disappeared, how the Fronde must triumph." "It is frightful," murmured Mazarin. "Sign the treaty, then, Monseigneur," said Aramis. "Suppose the Queen should refuse to ratify it?" "Nonsense," cried D'Artagnan. "I can manage so that Her Majesty will receive me well. I know an excellent method." "What?" "I shall take Her Majesty the letter in which you tell her that the finances are exhausted." "And then?" asked Mazarin, turning pale. "When I see Her Majesty embarrassed, I shall conduct her to Rouen, make her enter the orangery and show her a certain spring which turns a box." "Enough, sir," muttered the cardinal. "You have said enough. Where is the treaty?" "Here it is," replied Aramis. "Sign, my lord," and he gave him a pen. Mazarin arose, walked some moments, thoughtful, but not dejected. "And when I have signed," he said, "what is to be my guarantee?" "My word of honor, sir," said Athos. Mazarin started, turned toward the Comte de la Fere, and looking for an instant at that grand and honest countenance, took the pen. "It is sufficient, Count," he said, and signed the treaty. "And now, Monsieur d'Artagnan," he said, "prepare to set off for Saint-Germain and take a letter from me to the Queen." Chapter 88 shows how with threat and pen more is effected than by the sword. D'Artagnan knew his part well. He was aware that opportunity has a forelock only for him who will take it, and he was not a man to let it go by him without seizing it. He soon arranged a prompt and certain manner of traveling, by sending relays of horses to Chantilly, so that he might be in Paris in 5 or 6 hours. But before setting out he reflected that for a lad of intelligence and experience he was in a singular predicament, since he was proceeding toward uncertainty and leaving certainty behind him. "In fact," he said as he was about to mount and start on his dangerous mission, "Athos, for generosity, is a hero of romance. Porthos has an excellent disposition, but is easily influenced. Aramis has a hieroglyphic countenance, always illegible. What will come out of those 3 elements when I am no longer present to combine them? The deliverance of the cardinal, perhaps. Now, the deliverance of the cardinal would be the ruin of our hopes, and our hopes are thus far the only recompense we have for labors in comparison with which those of Hercules were pygmean." He went to find Aramis. "You, my dear Chevalier d'Herblay," he said, "are the Fronde incarnate. Mistrust Athos, therefore, who will not prosecute the affairs of anyone, even his own. Mistrust Porthos, especially, who, to please the Count whom he regards as God on earth, will assist him in contriving Mazarin's escape, if Mazarin has the wit to weep or play the chivalric." Aramis smiled. His smile was at once cunning and resolute. "Fear nothing," he said. "I have my conditions to impose. My private ambition tends only to the profit of him who has justice on his side." "Good," thought D'Artagnan. "In this direction I am satisfied." He pressed Aramis's hand and went in search of Porthos. "Friend," he said, "you have worked so hard with me toward building up our fortune, that at the moment when we are about to reap the fruits of our labors, it would be a ridiculous piece of silliness in you to allow yourself to be controlled by Aramis, whose cunning you know, a cunning which, we may say between ourselves, is not always without egotism, or by Athos, a noble and disinterested man, but blasé, who, desiring nothing further for himself, doesn't sympathize with the desires of others. What should you say if either of these two friends proposed to you to let Mazarin go?" "Why, I should say that we had too much trouble in taking him to let him off so easily." "Bravo, Porthos! And you would be right, my friend, for in losing him you would lose your barony, which you have in your grasp, to say nothing of the fact that, were he once out of this, Mazarin would have you hanged." "Do you think so?" "I am sure of it." "Then I would kill him rather than let him go." "And you would act rightly. There is no question, you understand, provided we secure our own interests, of securing those of the Frondeurs, who, besides, don't understand political matters as we old soldiers do." "Never fear, dear friend," said Porthos. "I shall see you through the window as you mount your horse. I shall follow you with my eyes as long as you are in sight. Then I shall place myself at the cardinal's door, a door with glass windows. I shall see everything, and at the least suspicious sign I shall begin to exterminate." "Bravo!" thought D'Artagnan. "On this side I think the cardinal will be well guarded." He pressed the hand of the Lord of Pierrefonds and went in search of Athos. "My dear Athos," he said, "I am going away. I have only one thing to say to you. You know, and of Austria, the captivity of Mazarin alone guarantees my life. If you let him go I am a dead man. I needed nothing less than that consideration, my dear D'Artagnan, to persuade myself to adopt the role of jailer. I give you my word that you will find the cardinal where you leave him." "This reassures me more than all the royal signatures," thought D'Artagnan. "Now that I have the word of Athos I can set out." D'Artagnan started alone on his journey, without other escort than his sword, and with a simple passport from Mazarin to secure his admission to the queen's presence. 6 hours after he left Pierrefonds he was at Saint-Germain. The disappearance of Mazarin was not as yet generally known. Anne of Austria was informed of it and concealed her uneasiness from everyone. In the chamber of D'Artagnan and Porthos the two soldiers had been found bound and gagged. On recovering the use of their limbs and tongues they could, of course, tell nothing but what they knew, that they had been seized, stripped, and bound. But as to what had been done by Porthos and D'Artagnan afterward they were as ignorant as all the inhabitants of the chateau. Bernouin alone knew a little more than the others. Bernouin, seeing that his master did not return and hearing the stroke of midnight, had made an examination of the orangery. The first door, barricaded with furniture, had aroused in him certain suspicions, but without communicating his suspicions to anyone he had patiently worked his way into the midst of all that confusion. Then he came to the corridor, all the doors of which he found open. So, too, was the door of Athos's chamber and that of the park. From the latter point it was easy to follow tracks on the snow. He saw that these tracks tended toward the wall. On the other side he found similar tracks, then footprints of horses and then signs of a troop of cavalry which had moved away in the direction of Enghien. He could no longer cherish any doubt that the cardinal had been carried off by the 3 prisoners, since the prisoners had disappeared at the same time, and he had hastened to Saint-Germain to warn the queen of that disappearance, and had enforced the utmost secrecy and had disclosed the event to no one except the Prince de Condé, who had sent 500 or 600 horsemen into the environs of Saint-Germain with orders to bring in any suspicious person who was going away from Rouen, in whatsoever direction it might be. Now, since D'Artagnan did not constitute a body of horsemen, since he was alone, since he was not going away from Rouen and was going to Saint-Germain, no one paid any attention to him and his journey was not obstructed in any way. On entering the courtyard of the old chateau, the first person seen by our ambassador was Maître Bernouin in person, who, standing on the threshold, awaited news of his vanished master. At the sight of D'Artagnan, who entered the courtyard on horseback, Bernouin rubbed his eyes and thought he must be mistaken. But D'Artagnan made a friendly sign to him with his head, dismounted, and throwing his bridle to a lackey who was passing, he approached the valet-de-chamber with a smile on his lips. "Monsieur d'Artagnan," cried the latter, like a man who has the nightmare and talks in his sleep, "Monsieur d'Artagnan." "Himself, Monsieur Bernouin. And why have you come here?" "To bring news of Monsieur de Mazarin, the freshest news there is." "What has become of him, then?" "He is as well as you and I." "Nothing bad has happened to him, then?" "Absolutely nothing. He felt the need of making a trip in the Isle de France, and begged us, the Comte de la Fère and Monsieur du Vallon, to accompany him. We were too devoted servants to refuse him a request of that sort. We set out last evening, and here we are." "Here you are." His Eminence had something to communicate to Her Majesty, something secret and private, a mission that could be confided only to a sure man, and so has sent me to Saint-Germain. And therefore, my dear Monsieur Bernouin, if you wish to do what will be pleasing to your master, announce to Her Majesty that I have come, and tell her with what purpose." Whether he spoke seriously or in jest, since it was evident that under existing circumstances D'Artagnan was the only man who could relieve the Queen's uneasiness, Bernouin went without hesitation to announce to her this strange embassy, and as he had foreseen, the Queen gave orders to introduce Monsieur d'Artagnan at once. D'Artagnan approached the sovereign with every mark of profound respect, and having fallen on his knees presented to her the cardinal's letter. It was, however, merely a letter of introduction. The Queen read it, recognized the writing, and, since there were no details in it of what had occurred, asked for particulars. D'Artagnan related everything with that simple and ingenuous air which he knew how to assume on occasions. The Queen, as he went on, looked at him with increasing astonishment. She could not comprehend how a man could conceive such an enterprise, and still less how he could have the audacity to disclose it to her whose interest and almost duty it was to punish him. "How, sir," she cried, as D'Artagnan finished, "you dare to tell me the details of your crime, to give me an account of your treason? Pardon, madam, but I think that either I have expressed myself badly or your Majesty has imperfectly understood me. There is here no question of crime or treason. Monsieur de Mazarin held us in prison, Monsieur du Vallon and myself, because we could not believe that he had sent us to England to quietly look on while they cut off the head of Charles I, brother-in-law of the late king, your husband, the consort of Madame Henrietta, your sister and your guest, and because we did all that we could do to save the life of the royal martyr. We were then convinced, my friend and I, that there was some error of which we were the victims, and that an explanation was called for between His Eminence and ourselves. Now, that an explanation may bear fruit, it is necessary that it should be quietly conducted, far from noise and interruption. We have therefore taken away Monsieur le Cardinal to my friend's chateau, and there we have come to an understanding. Well, madam, it proved to be as we had supposed. There was a mistake. Monsieur de Mazarin had thought that we had rendered service to General Cromwell, instead of King Charles, which would have been a disgrace, rebounding from us to him, and from him to your Majesty, a dishonor which would have tainted the royalty of your illustrious son. We were able to prove the contrary, and that proof we are ready to give to your Majesty, calling in support of it the august widow weeping in the Louvre, where your royal munificence has provided for her a home. That proof satisfied him so completely that, as a sign of satisfaction, he has sent me, as your Majesty may see, to consider with you what reparation should be made to gentlemen unjustly treated and wrongfully persecuted. I listen to you, and I wonder at you, sir, said the Queen. In fact, I have rarely seen such excess of impudence. Your Majesty, on your side, said D'Artagnan, is as much mistaken as to our intentions as the Cardinal Mazarin has always been. You are in error, sir, answered the Queen. I am so little mistaken that in 10 minutes you shall be arrested, and in an hour I shall set off at the head of my army to release my minister. I am sure your Majesty will not commit such an act of imprudence, first, because it would be useless and would produce the most disastrous results. Before he could be possibly set free, the cardinal would be dead, and indeed, so convinced is he of this, that he entreated me, should I find your majesty disposed to act in this way, to do all I could to induce you to change your resolution. Well, then, I will content myself with arresting you. Madam, the possibility of my arrest has been foreseen, and should I not have returned by tomorrow, at a certain hour the next day the cardinal will be brought to Paris and delivered to the Parliament. It is evident, sir, that your position has kept you out of relation to men and affairs, otherwise you would know that since we left Paris Monsieur le Cardinal has returned thither 5 or 6 times, that he has there met de Beaufort, de Bouillon, the coadjutor and d'Elbeuf, and that not one of them had any desire to arrest him. Your pardon, madam, I know all that. And therefore my friends will conduct Monsieur le Cardinal neither to de Beaufort, nor to de Bouillon, nor to the coadjutor, nor to d'Elbeuf. These gentlemen wage war on private account, and in buying them up, by granting them what they wished, Monsieur le Cardinal has made a good bargain. He will be delivered to the Parliament, members of which can, of course, be bought, but even Monsieur de Mazarin is not rich enough to buy the whole body. I think, returned Anne of Austria, fixing upon him a glance, which in any woman's face would have expressed disdain, but in a queen's, spread terror to those she looked upon. Nay, I perceive you dare to threaten the mother of your sovereign. Madam, replied D'Artagnan, I threaten simply and solely because I am obliged to do so. Believe me, madam, as true a thing as it is that a heart beats in this bosom, a heart devoted to you, believe that you have been the idol of our lives, that we have, as you well know, good heaven, risked our lives 20 times for your majesty. Have you, then, madam, no compassion for your servants who for 20 years have vegetated in obscurity, without betraying in a single sigh the solemn and sacred secrets they have had the honor to share with you? Look at me, madam, at me, whom you accuse of speaking loud and threateningly. What am I? A poor officer, without fortune, without protection, without a future, unless the eye of my queen, which I have sought so long, rests on me for a moment. Look at the Comte de la Fere, a type of nobility, a flower of chivalry. He has taken part against his queen, or rather, against her minister. He has not been unreasonably exacting, it seems to me. Look at Monsieur du Vallon, that faithful soul, that arm of steel, who for 20 years has awaited the word from your lips which will make him in rank what he is in sentiment and in courage. Consider, in short, your people who love you and who yet are famished, who have no other wish than to bless you, and who, nevertheless, no, I am wrong, your subjects, madam, will never curse you. Say one word to them and all will be ended. Peace succeed war, joy tears, and happiness to misfortune. Anne of Austria looked with wonderment on the warlike countenance of D'Artagnan, which betrayed a singular expression of deep feeling. Why did you not say all this before you took action, sir? She said. Because, madam, it was necessary to prove to your majesty one thing of which you doubted, that is, that we still possess amongst us some valor and are worthy of some consideration at your hands. And that valor would shrink from no undertaking, according to what I see. It has hesitated at nothing in the past. Why, then, should it be less daring in the future? Then, in case of my refusal, this valor, should a struggle occur, will even go the length of carrying me off in the midst of my court, to deliver me into the hands of the Fronde, as you propose to deliver my minister? We have not thought about it yet, madam, answered D'Artagnan, with that Gascon effrontery which had in him the appearance of naivete, but if we 4 had resolved upon it, we should do it most certainly. I ought, muttered Anne to herself, by this time to remember that these men are giants. Alas, madam, exclaimed D'Artagnan, this proves to me that not till today has your majesty had a just idea of us. Perhaps, said Anne, but that idea, if at last I have it, your majesty will do us justice. In doing us justice you will no longer treat us as men of vulgar stamp. You will see in me an ambassador worthy of the high interests he is authorized to discuss with his sovereign. Where is the treaty? Here it is. Anne of Austria cast her eyes upon the treaty that D'Artagnan presented to her. I do not see here, she said, anything but general conditions. The interests of the Prince de Conti or of the Ducs de Beaufort, de Bouillon and d'Elbeuf and of the coadjutor are herein consulted, but with regard to yours? We do ourselves justice, madam, even in assuming the high position that we have. We do not think ourselves worthy to stand near such great names. But you, I presume, have decided to assert your pretensions viva voce? I believe you, madam, to be a great and powerful queen, and that it will be unworthy of your power and greatness if you do not recompense the arms which will bring back His Eminence to Saint Germain. It is my intention so to do. Come, let us hear you. Speak. He who has negotiated these matters, forgive me if I begin by speaking of myself, but I must claim that importance which has been given to me, not assumed by me. He who has arranged matters for the return of the cardinal ought, it appears to me, in order that his reward may not be unworthy of your majesty, to be made commandant of the guards, an appointment something like that of captain of the musketeers. 'Tis the appointment Monsieur de Treville held, you ask of me. The place, madam, is vacant, and although 'tis a year since Monsieur de Treville has left it, it has not been filled. But it is one of the principal military appointments in the king's household. Monsieur de Treville was but a younger son of a simple Gascon family, like me, madam. He occupied that post for 20 years. You have an answer ready for everything, replied the queen, and she took from her bureau a document, which she filled up and signed. Undoubtedly, madam, said D'Artagnan, taking the document and bowing, this is a noble reward, but everything in the world is unstable, and the man who happened to fall into disgrace with your majesty might lose this office tomorrow. What more do you want? Asked the queen, coloring, as she found that she had to deal with a mind as subtle as her own. 100,000 francs for this poor captain of musketeers, to be paid whenever his services shall no longer be acceptable to your majesty. And hesitated. To think of the Parisians, soliloquized D'Artagnan, offering only the other day, by an edict of the Parliament, 600,000 francs to any mansoever who would deliver up the cardinal to them, dead or alive. If alive, in order to hang him; if dead, to deny him the rights of Christian burial. Come, said Anne, 'tis reasonable, since you only ask from a queen the sixth of what the Parliament has proposed, and she signed an order for 100,000 francs. Now then, she said, what next? Madam, my friend Du Vallon is rich, and has therefore nothing in the way of fortune to desire, but I think I remember that there was a question between him and Monsieur Mazarin as to making his estate a barony. Nay, it must have been a promise. A country clown, said Anne of Austria, people will laugh. Let them, answered D'Artagnan. But I am sure of one thing, that those who laugh at him in his presence will never laugh a second time. Here goes the barony, said the queen. She signed a patent. Now there remains the Chevalier, or the Abbé de Herblay, as your majesty pleases. Does he wish to be a bishop? No, madam, something easier to grant. What? It is that the king should deign to stand godfather to the son of Madame de Longueville. The queen smiled. Monsieur de Longueville is of royal blood, madam, said D'Artagnan. Yes, said the queen, but his son. His son, madam, must be, since the husband of the son's mother is. And your friend has nothing more to ask for Madame de Longueville? No, madam, for I presume that the king, standing godfather to him, could do no less than present him with 500,000 francs, giving his father, also, the government of Normandy. As to the government of Normandy, replied the queen, I think I can promise, but with regard to the present, the cardinal is always telling me there is no more money in the royal coffers. We shall search for some, madam, and I think we can find a little, and if your majesty approves, we will seek for some together. What next? What next, madam? Yes. That is all. Haven't you, then, a fourth companion? Yes, madam, the Comte de la Fere. What does he ask? Nothing. There is in the world, then, one man who, having the power to ask, asks nothing. There is the Comte de la Fere, madam. The Comte de la Fere is not a man. What is he, then? The Comte de la Fere is a demigod. Has he not a son, a young man, a relative, a nephew, of whom Comminges spoke to me as being a brave boy, and who, with Monsieur de Chatillon, brought the standards from Lens? He has, as your majesty has said, a ward, who is called the Vicomte de Bragelonne. If that young man should be appointed to a regiment, what would his guardian say? Perhaps he would accept. Perhaps. Yes, if your Majesty herself should beg him to accept. He must be indeed a strange man. Well, we will reflect and perhaps we will beg him. Are you satisfied, sir? There is one thing the Queen has not signed, her assent to the treaty. Of what use today? I will sign it tomorrow. I can assure Her Majesty that if she does not sign today, she will not have time to sign tomorrow. Consent, then, I beg you, madam, to write at the bottom of this schedule, which has been drawn up by Mazarin, as you see. I consent to ratify the treaty proposed by the Parisians. And was caught, she could not draw back. She signed. But scarcely had she done so when pride burst forth and she began to weep. D'Artagnan started on seeing these tears. Since that period of history queens have shed tears, like other women. The Gascon shook his head. These tears from royalty melted his heart. Madam, he said, kneeling, look upon the unhappy man at your feet. He begs you to believe that at a gesture of your Majesty everything will be possible to him. He has faith in himself, he has faith in his friends, he wishes also to have faith in his queen. And in proof that he fears nothing, that he counts on nothing, he will restore Monsieur de Mazarin to your Majesty without conditions. Behold, madam, here are the august signatures of your Majesty's hand. If you think you are right in giving them to me, you shall do so, but from this very moment you are free from any obligation to keep them. And D'Artagnan, full of splendid pride and manly intrepidity, placed in Anne's hands, in a bundle, the papers that he had one by one won from her with so much difficulty. There are moments, for if everything is not good, everything in this world is not bad, in which the most rigid and the coldest soul is softened by the tears of strong emotion, heart-arraigning sentiment. One of these momentary impulses actuated Anne. D'Artagnan, when he gave way to his own feelings, which were in accordance with those of the Queen, had accomplished more than the most astute diplomacy could have attempted. He was therefore instantly recompensed, either for his address or for his sensibility, whichever it might be termed. You were right, sir, said Anne. I misunderstood you. There are the acts signed. I deliver them to you without compulsion. Go and bring me back the cardinal as soon as possible. Madam, faltered D'Artagnan, 'tis 20 years ago, I have a good memory, since I had the honor behind a piece of tapestry in the Hôtel de Ville, of kissing one of those lovely hands. There is the other, replied the Queen, and that the left hand should not be less liberal than the right. She drew from her finger a diamond similar to the one formerly given to him. Take and keep this ring in remembrance of me. Madam, said D'Artagnan, rising, I have only one thing more to wish, which is, that the next thing you ask from me shall be my life. And with this conclusion, a way peculiar to himself, he rose and left the room. I never rightly understood those men, said the Queen as she watched him retiring from her presence, and it is now too late, for in a year the king will be of age. In 24 hours D'Artagnan and Porthos conducted Mazarin to the Queen, and the one received his commission, the other his patent of nobility. On the same day the Treaty of Paris was signed, and it was everywhere announced that the cardinal had shut himself up for 3 days in order to draw it up with the greatest care. Here is what each of the parties concerned gained by that treaty. Monsieur de Conti received Damvillers, and having made his proofs as general, he succeeded in remaining a soldier, instead of being made cardinal. Moreover, something had been said of a marriage with Mazarin's niece. The idea was welcomed by the prince, to whom it was of little importance whom he married, so long as he married someone. The Duc de Beaufort made his entrance at court, receiving ample reparation for the wrongs he had suffered, and all the honor due to his rank. Full pardon was accorded to those who had aided in his escape. He received also the office of admiral, which had been held by his father, the Duc de Vendôme, and an indemnity for his houses and castles, demolished by the Parliament of Bretagne. The Duc de Bouillon received domains of a value equal to that of his Principality of Sedan, and the title of prince, granted to him and to those belonging to his house. The Duc de Longueville gained the government of Pontelarchi, 500,000 francs for his wife, and the honor of seeing her son held at the baptismal font by the young king and Henrietta of England. Aramis stipulated that Bazin should officiate at that ceremony and that Planchet should furnish the christening sugar plums. The Duc d'Elbeuf obtained payment of certain sums due to his wife, 100,000 francs for his eldest son and 25,000 for each of the 3 others. The coadjutor alone obtained nothing. They promised, indeed, to negotiate with the Pope for a cardinal's hat for him, but he knew how little reliance should be placed on such promises made by the Queen and Mazarin. Quite contrary to the lot of Monsieur de Conti, unable to be cardinal, he was obliged to remain a soldier. And therefore, when all Paris was rejoicing in the expected return of the king, appointed for the next day, Gondi alone, in the midst of the general happiness, was dissatisfied. He sent for the 2 men whom he was wont to summon when in especially bad humor. Those 2 men were the Count de Rochefort and the mendicant of Saint Eustache. They came with their usual promptness, and the coadjutor spent with them a part of the night. Chapter 89. Difficult for kings to return to the capitals of their kingdoms. Whilst D'Artagnan and Porthos were engaged in conducting the cardinal to Saint-Germain, Athos and Aramis returned to Paris. Each had his own particular visit to make. Aramis rushed to the Hôtel de Ville, where Madame de Longueville was sojourning. The Duchess loudly lamented the announcement of peace. War had made her a queen, peace brought her abdication. She declared that she would never assent to the treaty and that she wished eternal war. But when Aramis had presented that peace to her in a true light, that is to say, with all its advantages, when he had pointed out to her, in exchange for the precarious and contested royalty of Paris, the viceroyalty of Fontelarchi, in other words, of all Normandy, when he had rung in her ears the 500,000 francs promised by the cardinal, when he had dazzled her eyes with the honor bestowed on her by the king in holding her child at the baptismal font, Madame de Longueville contended no longer, except as is the custom with pretty women to contend, and defended herself only to surrender at last. Aramis made a presence of believing in the reality of her opposition and was unwilling to deprive himself in his own view of the credit of her conversion. "Madam," he said, "you have wished to conquer the prince your brother, that is to say, the greatest captain of the age, and when women of genius wish anything they always succeed in attaining it. You have succeeded, the prince is beaten, since he can no longer fight. Now attach him to our party. Withdraw him gently from the queen, whom he does not like, from Mazarin, whom he despises. The Fronde is a comedy, of which the first act only is played. Let us wait for a denouement, for the day when the prince, thanks to you, shall have turned against the court." Madame de Longueville was persuaded. This Frondist duchess trusted so confidently to the power of her fine eyes that she could not doubt their influence even over Monsieur de Condé, and the chronicles of the time aver that her confidence was justified. Athos, on quitting Aramis, went to Madame de Chevreuse. Here was another frondeuse to persuade, and she was even less open to conviction than her younger rival. There had been no stipulation in her favor. Monsieur de Chevreuse had not been appointed governor of a province, and if the queen should consent to be godmother, it could be only of her grandson or granddaughter. At the first announcement of peace, Madame de Chevreuse frowned, and in spite of all the logic of Athos to show her that a prolonged war would have been impracticable, contended in favor of hostilities. "My fair friend," said Athos, "allow me to tell you that everybody is tired of war. You will get yourself exiled, as you did in the time of Louis XIII. Believe me, we have passed the time of success in intrigue, and your fine eyes are not destined to be eclipsed by regretting Paris, where there will always be 2 queens as long as you are there." "Oh," cried the Duchess, "I cannot make war alone, but I can avenge myself on that ungrateful queen and most ambitious favorite on the honor of a duchess. I will avenge myself." "Madam," replied Athos, "do not injure the Vicomte de Bragelonne, do not ruin his prospects. Alas! Excuse my weakness. There are moments when a man grows young again in his children." The Duchess smiled, half tenderly, half ironically. "Count," she said, "you are, I fear, gained over to the court. I suppose you have a blue ribbon in your pocket?" "Yes, madam, I have that of the Garter, which King Charles I gave me some days before he died." "Come, I am growing an old woman," said the Duchess, pensively. Athos took her hand and kissed it. She sighed as she looked at him. "Count," she said, "Bragelonne must be a charming place. You are a man of taste. The water, woods, flowers there?" She sighed again and leaned her charming head, gracefully reclined, on her hand, still beautiful in form and color. "Madam," exclaimed Athos, "what were you saying just now about growing old? Never have I seen you look so young, so beautiful." The Duchess shook her head. "Does Monsieur de Bragelonne remain in Paris?" she inquired. "What think you of it?" inquired Athos. "Leave him with me," replied the Duchess. "No, madam. If you have forgotten the history of Oedipus, I at least remember it. Really, sir, you are delightful, and I should like to spend a month at Bragelonne." "Are you not afraid of making people envious of me, Duchess?" replied Athos. "No, I shall go incognito, Count, under the name of Marie Mitchin." "You are adorable, madam. But do not keep Raoul with you." "Why not?" "Because he is in love. He is quite a child. And 'tis a child he loves." Athos became thoughtful. "You are right, Duchess. This singular passion for a child of 7 may some day make him very unhappy. There is to be war in Flanders. He shall go thither. And at his return you will send him to me. I will arm him against love." "Alas, madam," exclaimed Athos, "today love is like war. The breastplate is becoming useless." Raoul entered at this moment. He came to announce that the solemn entrance of the king, queen, and her ministers was to take place on the ensuing day. The next day, in fact, at daybreak, the court made preparations to quit Saint-Germain. Meanwhile, the queen every hour had been sending for D'Artagnan. "I hear," she said, "that Paris is not quiet. I am afraid for the king's safety. Place yourself close to the coach door on the right." "Reassure yourself, madam, I will answer for the king's safety." As he left the queen's presence, Bernouin summoned him to the cardinal. "Sir," said Mazarin to him, "an émeute is spoken of in Paris. I shall be on the king's left, and as I am the chief person threatened, remain at the coach door to the left." "Your eminence may be perfectly easy," replied D'Artagnan. "They will not touch a hair of your head." "Deuce take it," he thought to himself, "how can I take care of both? Plague on't, I will guard the king and Porthos shall guard the cardinal." This arrangement pleased every one. The queen had confidence in the courage of D'Artagnan, which she knew, and the cardinal in the strength of Porthos, which he had experienced. The royal procession set out for Paris. Guitant and Comminges, at the head of the guards, marched first. Then came the royal carriage, with D'Artagnan on one side, Porthos on the other. Then the musketeers, for 22 years staunch friends of D'Artagnan. During 20 he had been lieutenant, their captain since the night before. The cortège proceeded to Notre Dame, where a Te Deum was chanted. All Paris were in the streets. The Swiss were drawn up along the road, but as the road was long, they were placed at 6 or 8 feet distant from each other and 1 deep only. This force was therefore wholly insufficient, and from time to time the line was broken through by the people and was formed again with difficulty. Whenever this occurred, although it proceeded only from goodwill and a desire to see the king and queen, and looked at D'Artagnan anxiously, Mazarin, who had dispensed 1,000 louis to make the people cry, "Long live Mazarin," and who had accordingly no confidence in acclamations bought at 20 pistoles each, kept one eye on Porthos, but that gigantic bodyguard replied to the look with his great bass voice, "Be tranquil, my lord," and Mazarin became more and more composed. At the Palais Royal, the crowd, which had flowed in from the adjacent street, was still greater. Like an impetuous mob, a wave of human beings came to meet the carriage and rolled tumultuously into the Rue Saint-Honoré. When the procession reached the palace, loud cries of "Long live their majesties" resounded. Mazarin leaned out of the window. 1 or 2 shouts of "Long live the cardinal" saluted his shadow, but instantly hisses and yells stifled them remorselessly. Mazarin turned pale and shrank back in the coach. "Low-born fellows," ejaculated Porthos. D'Artagnan said nothing, but twirled his mustache with a peculiar gesture which showed that his fine Gascon humor was awake. Anne of Austria bent down and whispered in the young king's ear, "Say something gracious to Monsieur D'Artagnan, my son." The young king leaned toward the door. "I have not said good morning to you, Monsieur D'Artagnan," he said. Nevertheless, I have remarked you. It was you who were behind my bed curtains that night the Parisians wished to see me asleep. And if the king permits me, returned the Gascon, I shall be near him always when there is danger to be encountered. Sir, said Mazarin to Porthos, what would you do if the crowd fell upon us? Kill as many as I could, my lord. Brave as you are and strong as you are, you could not kill them all. 'Tis true, answered Porthos, rising on his saddle, in order that he might appraise the immense crowd, there are a lot of them. I think I should like the other fellow better than this one, said Mazarin to himself, and he threw himself back in his carriage. The queen and her minister, more especially the latter, had reason to feel anxious. The crowd, whilst preserving an appearance of respect and even of affection for the king and queen regent, began to be tumultuous. Reports were whispered about, like certain sounds which announce, as they whistle from wave to wave, the coming storm, and when they pass athwart a multitude, presage and immute. D'Artagnan turned toward the musketeers and made a sign imperceptible to the crowd, but very easily understood by that chosen regiment, the flower of the army. The ranks closed firmly in, and a kind of majestic tremor ran from man to man. At the Barrière des Sergents the procession was obliged to stop. Comminges left the head of the escort and went to the queen's carriage, and questioned D'Artagnan by a look. He answered in the same language. "Proceed," she said. Comminges returned to his post. An effort was made, and the living barrier was violently broken through. Some complaints arose from the crowd and were addressed this time to the king as well as the minister. "Onward!" cried D'Artagnan in a loud voice. "Onward!" cried Porthos. But as if the multitude had waited only for this demonstration to burst out, all the sentiments of hostility that possessed it exploded simultaneously. Cries of "Down with Mazarin!" "Death to the cardinal!" resounded on all sides. At the same time through the streets of Grenelle, Saint-Honoré, and Ducoq, a double stream of people broke the feeble hedge of Swiss guards and came like a whirlwind even to the very legs of Porthos's horse and that of D'Artagnan. This new eruption was more dangerous than the others, being composed of armed men. It was plain that it was not the chance combination of those who had collected a number of the malcontents at the same spot, but a concerted organized attack. Each of these mobs was led by a chief, one of whom appeared to belong, not to the people, but to the honorable corporation of mendicants, and the other, notwithstanding his affected imitation of the people, might easily be discerned to be a gentleman. Both were evidently stimulated by the same impulse. There was a shock which was perceived even in the royal carriage. Myriads of hoarse cries, forming one vast uproar, were heard, mingled with guns firing. "Ho! Musketeers!" cried D'Artagnan. The escort divided into two files. One of them passed around to the right of the carriage, the other to the left. One went to support D'Artagnan, the other Porthos. Then came a skirmish, the more terrible because it had no definite object, the more melancholy because those engaged in it knew not for whom they were fighting. Like all popular movements, the shock given by the rush of this mob was formidable. The musketeers, few in number, not being able, in the midst of this crowd, to make their horses wheel around, began to give way. D'Artagnan offered to lower the blinds of the royal carriage, but the young king stretched out his arm, saying, "No, sir, I wish to see everything." "If your majesty wishes to look out, what then look?" replied D'Artagnan. And turning with that fury which made him so formidable, he rushed toward the chief of the insurgents, a man who, with a huge sword in his hand, was trying to hew a passage to the coach door through the musketeers. "Make room!" cried D'Artagnan. "Zounds! Give way!" At these words the man with a pistol and sword raised his head, but it was too late. The blow was sped by D'Artagnan. The rapier had pierced his bosom. "Confound it!" cried the Gascon, trying in vain, too late, to retract the thrust. "What the devil are you doing here, Count?" "Accomplishing my destiny," replied Rochefort, falling on one knee. "I have already got up again after 3 stabs from you. I shall never rise after this 4th. "Count," said D'Artagnan, with some degree of emotion, "I struck without knowing that it was you. I am sorry, if you die, that you should die with sentiments of hatred toward me." Rochefort extended his hand to D'Artagnan, who took it. The Count wished to speak, but a gush of blood stifled him. He stiffened in the last convulsions of death and expired. "Back, people!" cried D'Artagnan. "Your leader is dead. You have no longer any business here." Indeed, as if de Rochefort had been the very soul of the attack, the crowd who had followed and obeyed him took to flight on seeing him fall. D'Artagnan charged, with a party of musketeers, up the Rue du Coq, and the portion of the mob he assailed disappeared like smoke, dispersing near the place Saint-Germain-l'Auxerrois and taking the direction of the quays. D'Artagnan returned to help Porthos, if Porthos needed help, but Porthos, for his part, had done his work as conscientiously as D'Artagnan. The left of the carriage was as well cleared as the right, and they drew up the blind of the window which Mazarin, less heroic than the king, had taken the precaution to lower. Porthos looked very melancholy. "What a devil of a face you have, Porthos! And what a strange air for a victor!" "But you," answered Porthos, "seem to me agitated." "There's a reason. Zounds, I have just killed an old friend." "Indeed," replied Porthos. "Who?" "That poor Count de Rochefort." "Well, exactly like me. I have just killed a man whose face is not unknown to me. Unluckily, I hit him on the head and immediately his face was covered with blood." "And he said nothing as he died?" "Yes, he exclaimed, 'Oh!'" "I suppose," answered D'Artagnan laughing, "if he only said that, it did not enlighten you much." "Well, sir," cried the queen, "Madam, the passage is quite clear and your majesty can continue your road." In fact, the procession arrived, in safety at Notre Dame, at the front gate of which all the clergy, with the coadjutor at their head, awaited the king, the queen and the minister, for whose happy return they chanted a Te Deum. As the service was drawing to a close, a boy entered the church in great excitement, ran to the sacristy, dressed himself quickly in the choir robes, and cleaving, thanks to that uniform, the crowd that filled the temple, approached Bazin, who, clad in his blue robe, was standing gravely in his place at the entrance to the choir. Bazin felt someone pulling his sleeve. He lowered to earth his eyes, beatifically raised to heaven, and recognized Fouquet. "Well, you rascal, what is it? How do you dare to disturb me in the exercise of my functions?" asked the beadle. "Monsieur Bazin," said Fouquet, "Monsieur Mart, you know who he is. He gives holy water at Saint Eustache." "Well, to go on." "Well, he received in the scrimmage a sword stroke on the head. That great giant who was there gave it to him." "In that case," said Bazin, "he must be pretty sick. So sick that he is dying, and he wants to confess to the coadjutor, who, they say, has power to remit great sins. And does he imagine that the coadjutor will put himself out for him? To be sure, the coadjutor has promised." "Who told you that?" "Monsieur Maillard himself." "You have seen him, then?" "Certainly, I was there when he fell." "What were you doing there?" "I was shouting, 'Down with Mazarin! Death to the cardinal! The Italian to the gallows!' Isn't that what you would have me shout?" "Be quiet, you rascal," said Bazin, looking uneasily around. "So that he told me, that poor Monsignard, 'Go find the coadjutor, Fouquet, and if you bring him to me you shall be my heir.' Say, then, Father Bazin, the heir of Monsieur Maillard, the giver of holy water at Saint Eustache. I shall have nothing to do but to fold my arms. All the same, I should like to do him that service. What do you say to it?" "I will tell the coadjutor," said Bazin. In fact, he slowly and respectfully approached the prelate and spoke to him privately a few words, to which the latter responded by an affirmative sign. He then returned with the same slow step and said, "Go and tell the dying man that he must be patient. Monseigneur will be with him in an hour." "Good," said Fouquet, "my fortune is made." "By the way," said Bazin, "where was he carried?" "To the Tower Saint Jacques Louisiana Boucherie," and delighted with the success of his embassy, Fouquet started off at the top of his speed. When the Te Deum was over, the coadjutor, without stopping to change his priestly dress, took his way toward that old tower which he knew so well. He arrived in time. Though sinking from moment to moment, the wounded man was not yet dead. The door was opened to the coadjutor of the room in which the mendicant was suffering. A moment later Fouquet went out, carrying in his hand a large leather bag. He opened it as soon as he was outside the chamber and to his great astonishment found it full of gold. The mendicant had kept his word and made Friquet his heir. "Mother Nanette!" cried Friquet, suffocating. "Mother Nanette!" He could say no more, but though he hadn't strength to speak he had enough for action. He rushed headlong to the street, and like the Greek from Marathon who fell in the square at Athens, with his laurel in his hand, Friquet reached Councillor Brousel's threshold, and then fell exhausted, scattering on the floor the louis disgorged by his leather bag. Mother Nanette began by picking up the louis, then she picked up Friquet. In the meantime the cortege returned to the Palais Royal. "That Monsieur d'Artagnan is a very brave man, mother," said the young king. "Yes, my son, and he rendered very important services to your father. Treat him kindly, therefore, in the future." "Captain," said the young king to D'Artagnan, on descending from the carriage, "the queen has charged me to invite you to dinner today, you and your friend the Baron du Vallon." That was a great honor for D'Artagnan and for Porthos. Porthos was delighted, and yet during the entire repast he seemed to be preoccupied. "What was the matter with you, Baron?" D'Artagnan said to him as they descended the staircase of the Palais Royal. "You seemed at dinner to be anxious about something." "I was trying," said Porthos, "to recall where I had seen that mendicant whom I must have killed." "And you couldn't remember?" "No." "Well, search, my friend, search, and when you have found, you will tell me, will you not?" "Pardieu," said Porthos. Chapter 90. Conclusion. On going home, the two friends found a letter from Athos, who desired them to meet him at the Grand Charlemagne on the following day. The friends went to bed early, but neither of them slept. When we arrive at the summit of our wishes, success has usually the power to drive away sleep on the first night after the fulfillment of long-cherished hopes. The next day at the appointed hour they went to see Athos and found him and Aramis in traveling costume. "What?" cried Porthos. "Are we all going away, then? I also have made my preparations this morning." "Oh, heavens!" "Yes," said Aramis. "There's nothing to do in Paris now there's no Fronde. The Duchess de Longueville has invited me to pass a few days in Normandy, and has deputed me, while her son is being baptized, to go and prepare her residence at Rouen. After which, if nothing new occurs, I shall go and bury myself in my convent at Noisily." "And I," said Athos, "am returning to Bragelonne. You know, dear D'Artagnan, I am nothing more than a good honest country gentleman. Raoul has no fortune other than I possess, poor child, and I must take care of it for him, since I only lend him my name. And Raoul, what shall you do with him? I leave him with you, my friend. War has broken out in Flanders. You shall take him with you there. I am afraid that remaining at Blois would be dangerous to his youthful mind. Take him and teach him to be as brave and loyal as you are yourself." "Then," replied D'Artagnan, "though I shall not have you, Athos, at all events I shall have that dear fair-haired head by me, and though he's but a boy, yet, since your soul lives again in him, dear Athos, I shall always fancy that you are near me, sustaining and encouraging me." The four friends embraced with tears in their eyes. Then they departed, without knowing whether they would ever see each other again. D'Artagnan returned to the Rue Tiquetonne with Porthos, still possessed by the wish to find out who the man was that he had killed. On arriving at the Hôtel de la Chevrette, they found the Baron's equipage all ready and Mousqueton on his saddle. "Come, D'Artagnan," said Porthos, "bid adieu to your sword and go with me to Pierrefonds, to Bracieux, or to Du Vallon. We will grow old together and talk of our companions." "No," replied D'Artagnan, "deuce take it, the campaign is going to begin, I wish to be there, I expect to get something by it." "What do you expect to get?" "Why, I expect to be made Marechal of France." "Ha!" cried Porthos, who was not completely taken in by D'Artagnan's gasconades. "Come, my brother, go with me," added D'Artagnan, "and I will see that you are made a duke." "No," answered Porthos, "Mouston has no desire to fight. Besides, they have erected a triumphal arch for me to enter my barony, which will kill my neighbors with envy." "To that I can say nothing," returned D'Artagnan, who knew the vanity of the new baron. "Then here's to our next merry meeting." "Adieu, dear captain," said Porthos, I shall always be happy to welcome you to my barony." "Yes, yes, when the campaign is over," replied the Gascon. "His Honor's equipage is waiting," said Mousqueton. The two friends, after a cordial pressure of the hands, separated. D'Artagnan was standing at the door looking after Porthos with a mournful gaze, when the Baron, after walking scarcely more than 20 paces, returned, stood still, struck his forehead with his finger and exclaimed, "I recollect." "What?" inquired D'Artagnan. "Who the beggar was that I killed." "Indeed! And who was he?" "'Twas that low fellow Bonacieux." And Porthos, enchanted at having relieved his mind, rejoined Mousqueton and they disappeared around an angle of the street. D'Artagnan stood for an instant, mute, pensive and motionless. Then, as he went in, he saw the fair Madeleine, his hostess, standing on the threshold. "Madeleine," said the Gascon, "give me your apartment on the first floor. Now that I am a captain in the Royal Musketeers, I must make an appearance. Nevertheless, reserve my old room on the 5th story for me. One never knows what may happen."